raw consciousness does not require a savior, but rather, raw consciousness requires only knowledge of oneself, and the power to access it. Remember this, as we unlock an even greater gnosis. From beyond the veil.
From the Pacific Northwest, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm Chris Gio. You are stepping beyond the veil with us this evening. I am joined, of course, by my little twin, and the evil twin, I should say. She's the bad one of the two, as you can tell.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
And we have a great show for you today. I have been waiting for tonight for a while. We're going to be rejoined by Robert W. Sullivan IV. We're going to talk about Esoteric Freemasonry, take that an even deeper step beyond the veil, even bigger step beyond the veil, I should say, and talk about some of his new work as well. But we're really going to learn a lot this evening about subduing our passions and improving ourselves. And that's what I wanted to talk about in the first hour of the broadcast. The balance. You know, we're always totally off balance, and you know, we come from a perspective sometimes where it's okay to be off balance in one regard, and you kind of look at people who are off balance on the other side of the spectrum as if there's something wrong with them. And they're not in balance. So there is definitely something wrong. But our vantage point sometimes comes from a place of believing that our place of off balance is the right way to do things. And we're off balance anyway it goes. Now, I hate to use the terms right or wrong because I'm not here to tell anybody what's right or what's wrong, but I can tell you what has worked for me and what I'm constantly struggling to try to maintain myself, because you know, all of this, it's work. It's not like you can just all of a sudden just wake up one day, you're enlightened, or even put in a ton of work and you wake up one day and you're enlightened and that's it. It's a constant struggle. It's a constant battle between the flesh and the spiritual. It's going to be a really, really interesting show for sure. Now, some of our listeners have been asking us to watch Westworld, and I fell asleep. I was just exhausted when we started watching it. I saw the first episode. Cherie watched probably 5 or 6 in a row.
Yeah.
And I need to go back and catch up, but it's absolutely freaking amazing. Like, okay, now I understand why you guys and gals were asking us to watch this particular show. I said something a couple of weeks ago on the broadcast about what if time doesn't exist, and what if our data point is a fixed point and not necessarily sequential. So you have the 1800 era, for example. What if that didn't actually exist within this particular artificial simulation that we're in? It's just the data from that previous data point that's been injected into this in order to make us believe that this reality is real, just to further underline
reinforce.
There you go. Reinforce the idea that this reality is real. So people were like, hey, you got to watch Westworld. You got to watch Westworld. It's exactly like that. So we started watching it. I mean, just from the first episode, like, I don't know what goes on as you get deeper into the episode, but just the first episode, I was like, oh, you're freaking kidding me. Okay. I'm channeling all this stuff out of the ayahuasca realm, out of my raw consciousness element, et cetera, et cetera. And here it is. Again, okay, here it is again. The exact same thing that I've been feeling intuitively and bringing back into this realm is right here in a freaking HBO series. Wow. Okay, so to me, again, it's confirmation. It's confirmation that more people are also feeling this intuitively, and it's coming out in our artistic expression. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Much more coming up right here on Beyond the Veil.
Before the soul can see, the harmony within must first be attained, and the fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion, as you step beyond the veil.
You know, balance is so very important, and as I said in the previous segment, it's a constant struggle that we strive to maintain. Well, we don't strive to maintain the struggle. We strive to maintain the balance. Just to clarify
regardless of the struggle.
Right. And we often forget that we have to take time to just chill out and just have fun with life. Last weekend, we had some technical glitches, and I was just frustrated throughout the entire day. I saw that Cherie looked grumpy, and I said she was grumpy at the beginning of the show. I didn't know what happened. She had wound up hitting her arm on the chair as she sat down, so she was trying to hold back the pain that she was and I just saw her in the camera, and I'm like, oh, she's grumpy again.
She's grumpy.
And I just kind of dismissed it like that.
Right.
And it was just this whole, just frustrating experience. But that's what happens when we are too focused on one particular thing, and we don't take time to just sit down and just chill. We often find ourselves not communicating with one another, not taking the time to spend with friends and family, and so on and so forth. And, it created a little bit of confusion. And then afterwards, we're like, oh, okay, so that's what happened. I was like, what's going on tonight? Why are you in such a bad mood? I'm not in a bad mood. I hit my arm. Oh.
Right as I was sitting down to do the show, you guys, I hit my elbow and on the chair.
And for anybody that doesn't know, she just had shoulder surgery about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks
about
ago?
8 weeks ago now.
Oh, is it 8 weeks?
About
okay.
7.
So
I just passed the 7-week mark.
So, she's still recovering from the shoulder surgery, which is why hitting the arm is so painful at this particular point.
And it was one of those things where if I had just given myself a few minutes for it to calm down, then I would have been able to do the show no problem. But I think sometimes I'm really impatient with myself, and I get mad at myself for not completely being 100% all the time. And that's another thing that we have to watch out for is there's also this imbalance. There's definitely an imbalance in a lot of people in the other direction where you're not taking care of yourself, or you're not paying attention to your health like you should, and you're neglecting your health, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also the idea that, you can focus too much on your health, and that it becomes a thing where you're kind of bullying yourself for not being perfect and not being well 100% of the time. And that happens when you become imbalanced because of what Chris termed earlier today, spiritual fatigue. And I think a lot of people have been feeling that lately, especially during times like Mercury retrograde, when we also have the technical stuff happening.
Right afterwards, we lost power, we lost internet, everything.
And we couldn't even come back and do a show.
Right. It was freaking crazy. Yeah. So I'm glad we're back in the saddle tonight with all you lovely ladies and gentlemen out there. So I had a chance to party. I partied like Wednesday night, just like tripped for the sake of tripping, just watched the pretty colors, danced, music, some other stuff. And I just completely relaxed and let it all go.
Yep.
And I realized that, I haven't done something like that since I want to say June or May. I mean, it's been a long, long, long time, maybe even before that. I know I posted about it back in the day, and when it happened, and my Facebook, I like to share things on Facebook, but for me, it's also somewhat of a journal. I mean, I don't share personal stuff, but stuff like that kind of gives me a timeline of where I was at a particular time, and sometimes I'll go back through old posts from 5 years ago, and I'm like, oh my god, did I really?
I'm so embarrassed.
I'm so embarrassed to really think like that, but spiritual fatigue. This is what I posted earlier. Spiritual fatigue is something that I've gone through many times on this journey, particularly while working with ayahuasca. The quote-unquote truther programming have us focused on all of these horrible things in life 24/7, and programs a sense that nothing else matters except for the BS that we're dwelling in and exposing the New World Order and all of that. I found myself, and this is me thinking retrospectively throughout the course of the last several years, I've often found myself postponing ayahuasca journey simply because I was spiritually fatigued or physically fatigued. And that mindset that, okay, I got to focus on this, and that's it, and focus on this 24 hours a day, carried over into the spiritual realm. And because it did, into the spirituality work that I was doing, and because it did, I found myself spiritually fatigued. So I got a chance to party the other night, and when I came back, I felt renewed. I was like, okay, now it's time for some hardcore work. And I didn't realize that this was actually a psychedelic lesson being taught in and of itself right there, as I let go and just said, I don't want any lessons. I don't want to deal with any spiritual teachers. I don't want to deal with raw consciousness. I want to see pretty colors. I want to dance to music. I want to just be in the moment. And I came back with one of the greatest lessons that I've had this year, which is you've got to take a few steps back and you've got to just enjoy your life. We often don't enjoy our lives. So the psychedelic lesson can be applied to everything else in life. We're told here in the United States that we're supposed to work 12 to 18 hours a day. Always focus on business, and we don't ever take time to enjoy our lives. Or if we are, quote unquote researchers and things like that, we're conditioned to believe that we have to dwell on that frequency 24 hours a day and nothing else is important and nothing else matters. Either way, we're completely and totally off balance. So as you mentioned earlier, you were completely off balance because you were focusing on your health 24 hours a day. And, for me personally, it was a bit maddening because it's like, come on, enough of the shoulder surgery stuff. I understand. Right. Okay, there's nothing that's focusing on it is going to do except for aggravate the situation. We just have to go through. We have to go through this. It's something we have to go through. Yeah. We recognize one form of imbalance in people sometimes, and those are the people who sit around and they do absolutely nothing. And so we, from our vantage points, especially when we're working 12, 18 hours a day, we often find ourselves looking at people that aren't doing anything and saying, look at them. They're just sitting around doing absolutely nothing. They should be doing what I'm doing. I'm working 12, 18 hours a day. Look how hard of a worker I am. And I was the same way for a long time as well. But for some reason, that form of imbalance is acceptable to us, but the polar opposite is not. But anyway it goes, it's still a form of imbalance. So at the end of the day, it's really, really, really quite simple. The day is broken up into 24 hours. How do we divide these 24 hours? 8 hours for spirituality, friendship, and family. 8 hours for work. And 8 hours for sleep and rebalance. If we stuck to that, we would find ourselves being much, much, much more balanced than we actually are. Now, it's difficult sometimes to do this on a daily basis. So what I'm aiming to do now is balance that out and at least average that out. Spend as much time as I do working and the same amount of time spending with Cherie, going out and enjoying myself, spending time with friends and family, etc., etc. And sleep and rebalance is really important. I only sleep maybe 5 hours. So I've got 3 extra hours to not just sleep. I don't have to sleep on those 3 extra hours, but I could do nothing. I can just focus on myself. I can just meditate. I can just be. I can rebalance, spend that time rebalancing myself. And if I look at a week and I go, okay, I've worked for 80% of the week and I've slept for the rest. Where's everything else? Why am I unbalanced? Then the next week I can say, okay, next week, here's what I'm going to do. And it's kind of funny because after I was partying, I was flipping through Amazon, and that's how we came across Westworld. But for some reason, I decided to flip on Castaway with Tom Hanks. And it's a movie I've seen before. I don't know why. I was tired of flipping through Amazon, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. And I put that movie on. And I'm watching it, and I realized that a lot of this balance stuff that I'm talking about also is relatable in that particular film. In the film, he winds up getting stranded on a desert island for like 5 years. He comes back, meets his girlfriend at the time, and she had remarried, had kids, etc., etc. After he had been by himself stranded on a desert island. But what happened is that he decided that he was going to go deliver this package. He worked for FedEx. He was going to go to work on Christmas Day or on Christmas Eve. And he was there at the dinner table with everybody. He had just proposed to his girlfriend, and he wound up going on this trip where subsequently his plane crashed.
And his last words were, "I'll be right back."
His last words were, "I'll be right back." Had he maintained balance in his life and said, no, wait a minute, this is not a time for work. This is a time for refreshment and family. None of that would have happened to him. So as I was thinking about this whole rebalancing, I flip on this film and then all of a sudden, boom, I've got, more synchronistic confirmation right there in the plot line of this film. And now I know why my higher consciousness, why my raw consciousness was like, okay, watch this film. I know it has nothing to do with partying. It has nothing to do with feel good vibrations or anything like that, but just watch it because you're going to take something out of it. And that's what I took out of it. I was like, wow, had he done that, he would have married his girlfriend. Everything would have been great, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I've always thought that too. Like, I've tried to structure my life to where I can do as much work as I can from home. And go out to the office and things like that as minimal as possible, because I want to spend as much time with Cherie as I can. Even if I'm here and she's in the other room, it's at least togetherness, because one day is going to be the last day, and that's just the way things are. So why would I want to sacrifice all of that time? And when we get to that particular day, look back with regret and think, I could have done this different. I could have done that different. I could have rebalanced myself different, et cetera, et cetera. But knowing that now, maintaining the balance, I think when you do get to these certain markers in life, and, I think I'm going to go first. So she's going to be the one looking back at everything.
Don't say that.
Or we'll go together.
Yeah, I think we'll be going together.
All right. But, when we do get to that point, we look back on our lives and suddenly there's no regret. Suddenly it's like watching a movie that was really good, really satisfying, and perfectly played out, instead of being torn by regret and anguish, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because all of these things you could have done different. All of these things you could have done different. One thing I could have done different in my life that I think about is when my mother passed away. She wanted me to stay for Thanksgiving. I should have stayed for Thanksgiving. And I wound up leaving a couple of days before that. And I told her, I'll be back next year, don't worry. And I wound up leaving and going back home. I lived in another city. She wound up passing away a few weeks later. I had no idea that she was going to. It's not that I didn't have an idea. It's that I didn't want to believe it or accept it. So I think back on that time and think, I could have done that. Had I been more balanced, because I wanted to go back home and work. Like, I was working on a project at that time, and I was like, I want to go work on this project, and, to hell with everything else. Plus, Thanksgiving, to me, is being half Native American. It's not really that meaningful to me, because I understand what it actually symbolizes. But to her, it symbolized family, refreshment, and unity. And me, I was so off balance that's one of the points in my life that I think back in regret. Now, once I let go of that regret, once I let go of the hurt of the loss, once I let go of everything like that, then I was really able to fully understand and appreciate who my mother was to me and what she did for me. She really showed me the divine feminine element of consciousness embodied, with the selfless love and sacrifice that she did for me and my brother and sister. But there was a time for a while that I couldn't get over that particular hurt and pain and loss. And so it was blocking my ability to be able to see. It was blocking the visual path, the spiritually visual path of being able to see who exactly she was. So I know I veered off a little bit off topic, but we had talked to this guest and he hasn't said anything publicly, so I don't want to say anything that's personal for him, but I want to use his story as an example. He just contacted me and he said, hey man, I just lost a couple of family members and I lost my dog at the same time suddenly. All of a sudden, he's like, I'm sorry for not being in contact with you. I've been in complete and utter turmoil. And he said, I was working with mushrooms a couple of days ago, and it finally snapped me out of it. And I finally was able to see things in a perspective. And, I want to come back on the show. Please schedule me here in the next few weeks, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, dude, and this guy talks really big about the AI and stuff like that. So I totally understand being attacked by the AI when you start to tap into something. But I said, dude, I totally understand where you are. And I realized, and I've shared this story before, so it's not the first time I realized this, but I realized some of the experience that I've gone through in the past like the loss and the bad feelings and holding on to those bad feelings, now I can use those as a way to help people to get over stuff quicker, because I told him exactly what I just said about the loss and all of this. And he goes, dude, I realized all of that on the mushroom trip. I mean, it's incredible that you're saying this, because these are the exact realizations that I came to. So it's funny how, things that happen, bad things that happen in life, actually we can turn them around and we can make them good things. And it's all about the balance. It's all about having the right perspective. So I think I've ranted enough. Let me hand it over to Sheree. What do you think, little twin?
What you were talking about with wanting more time at the end of your life, it reminds me of a quote. Henry VIII was talking one time with a friend of his, and he said, I've been thinking a great deal about loss, because it was towards the end of his life. And this is a guy who had 5 wives. He killed 2 of them. 2 of them he put away, and sent away, and was just a generally angry, unhappy person most of his life. And he said, I've been thinking a great deal about loss. What loss, your grace, is to man most irrecoverable? And his friend said, his virtue. And he said, no, for by his actions he may redeem his virtue. And he said, well, then his honor. And he said, no, for again he may find the means to recover it. Even if some man recovers his fortune, he is lost. And he said, I cannot say, your majesty. And he said, time, of all losses, time is the most irrecuperable, for it can never be redeemed. And that's something that I've tried to remember throughout my life with everything that's happened, not just to me, but to people in my family, to the person I love most in the world, Chris. All of these things happen for a reason, and our responses to them, our reactions to them, and the way we inculcate it into our lives or refuse to is what really matters. And time is very precious to me now. And so every time I'm about to leave the house, I always give Chris a kiss before I go. We've been saying since the beginning, he's been saying since the beginning of the show, kiss the one you love right now, because you never know when the last time's going to be. And that's, he actually lives that mentality, that he actually lives that philosophy. It doesn't matter how mad he is at me. He will always give me a kiss before I leave. Because you never know. And this thing about spiritual fatigue is that we get into an autopilot kind of mode sometimes, where we're either autopiloting being lazy or autopiloting working too much. And most of our listeners probably would relate to the working too much part. And when you get an autopilot, it can be really damaging to your spirituality, and in the sense that it's kind of like leaving something in your fridge and letting it mold. It's kind of that same thing where you don't really realize it until it's happened. And then suddenly you wake up and you're like, whoa, where did I go? How did I get here from where I was a year ago? And it's turning around and going back to a more balanced place it's actually pretty easy once you realize what's happened, and once you kind of make the decision that you're not going to be imbalanced anymore. So.
Yes, definitely. So, do we have any listener questions that you want to go over?
We do. And this is from your post earlier on Facebook. Brad said, I have to try ayahuasca. I spent the last few years experimenting with baby wood rose seeds, not for the weak-minded, organic only.
I've never tried
I've
those.
never tried HBW. Never tried it, but I'd like to. It's LSA, isn't it? Instead of LSD, it's lysergic. It's
LSA, yeah.
Yeah.
I heard it was more nauseous than LSD or ayahuasca.
Yeah.
But ayahuasca could be pretty damn nauseous. So
right.
I don't know.
Right. And they can also be more toxic than ayahuasca if you're not careful. So be careful where you get those from. Dawn said, I don't have anything against people who use this. I was talking about ayahuasca. But as an alchemist, one has to be able to access these fields on their own without any help. That takes real work. Don't depend on a mind-altering substance to do the work for you.
Well,
go ahead.
I mean, man up and do some ayahuasca.
Right.
That's what I would say. You know, you don't know what's going on until you've actually done it. So, yeah, I agree. You should be able to achieve these states, but you have to have a reference point first, so you know,
right. So you know where
you're going. But as I've said before, there's no way you can achieve ayahuasca states without ayahuasca. No. You can tap into a raw consciousness element for sure, but you're not going to have an ayahuasca trip. Try getting drunk without alcohol. Right. You know, that's the first step right there. Try getting stoned without cannabis. Okay, that's if you can do that, then you can work your way up to try to provoke ayahuasca trips without ayahuasca. But until that point, you know, one step at a time. So, you know, try to get drunk without alcohol.
Well, and ayahuasca is work. It's not doing the work for you. It's facilitating the work. It's greasing the skids so that work can happen. Because a lot of people, especially ones that are living in the city or in this 21st century environment, that work can't really be accessed unless there's nothing else going on and you dedicate this time to this. And a lot of people just can't even flip the switch over to spirituality without at least some kind of activity like that.
Jexy, hold on. Jexy asked a great question on YouTube chat. Chris, do you know about the Rosicrucians and how the Roman Empire took the Hermetic principles for themselves and turned it into fascism? Do you know about the 7 Hermetic principles? Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course. And I'm going to save that question, Jexy. Yes. Thank you for asking that. I'm going to save that for when Robert W. Sullivan is on so we can get into Hermeticism and Masonry as well. So great question. I've got that jotted down on my clipboard right here.
Excellent. Laura Bruce said, Chris, I've been doing some networking for Elena Freeland and meeting some people in Olympia who are helping forward info about HAARP, chemtrails, smart meters, 5G, and other fun stuff. One of the main problems is the overwhelming scariness of these subjects. And the main question is, how do we protect ourselves? So far, the best advice is to eat well, stay healthy, and maintain a good spiritual practice. I was told that we have the ability to program our immune system and ask it to override and neutralize toxins
Blasphemy!
And nanoparticulates. Simple practices.
I remember I said something like this back in, 2015.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh my God, Chris is such an idiot. He thinks that he can be immune to all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, we're freaking infinite consciousness. We're raw consciousness, okay? And what's funny is the people who are laughing are sick in the hospital right now.
Right.
And here we are doing what we're doing. It is mind over matter. I agree with you, Laura Bruce, 100%. We'll be right back. Much more coming up right here on Beyond the Veil. And don't forget, hour number 2 and 3, Robert W. Sullivan will be joining us.
It's not a pretty picture, modern civilization. Most people in the world today are quite miserable, actually.
I guess the AI wanted to play another clip, so maybe this
they
is
have
important.
Very little hope.
Let's listen.
Their religions, their traditional value systems are being eroded. Lifespans are being shortened by pesticides, chemicals, all kinds of things in the environment. And there is very little political light on the horizon. I believe that it's reasonable, looking at this situation, to say that history failed and that the grand dream of Western civilization has in fact failed. And now we are attempting, with basically a carved wooden oar, to turn a battleship around. And it's a very frustrating undertaking. The momentum for catastrophe is enormous. But it's not 100% certain that catastrophe is what we're headed for, because we are not 100% unconscious. There are people struggling to figure out how to balance the relationship between the masculine and the feminine. We're in essentially a tragic situation. A tragic situation.
It is a tragic situation for sure.
Everything that is, was, and will be, eternally is, even the countless forms which are finite and perishable only in their objective, and not in their ideal form, the form which manifests itself beyond the veil.
Lots of love in the chat room, YouTube, Facebook, tfrlive.com as well. And Borpheus is in the house. What's up, Borpheus? And we'll do some shout outs here in just a few moments too. And thank you very much, Jexy and Sean too. Both of them said, hey, just got into your podcast. Love the podcast. It's my favorite, etc., etc. I've been listening to you nonstop. Sean had a really interesting experience that I want to get into here in just a few moments. And I've got some questions from Jaxie, Heart of Rebel, that we're going to wait for Robert W. Sullivan. Like, do you know about the Masonic concept of Prince of the Royal Secret? So I do want to get into that. And as somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, the West is really, really screwed up. Like, why does everybody want to travel west? Me personally, I'm traveling east towards the goddess. That's what it's all about. So Mad Hatter asked, how close is a strong shroom trip to the DMT trip? You know, I haven't worked with mushrooms very much in my life. I think I've worked with them. I can probably count on both hands how many times I've had mushrooms. And it's not that I don't want mushrooms. It's that they just don't resonate with my frequency for some reason. I go out and look for them and I never find them. So, yeah, it sucks. And then we tried to grow some one time and the bottles got all moldy and everything. And I said, oh, you know what? Okay, this isn't for me. But, the few experiences that I've had have been pretty similar. Ayahuasca is more domineering. She's more serious. And mushroom seems more giggly. So those were the two differences that I saw. But people have told me that very, very, very strong mushroom trips are very similar to ayahuasca experiences. Psilocybin is actually one molecule away from dimethyltryptamine. So them being so similar, I imagine provokes very, very similar experiences. So I've heard about 5 dried grams. I'd say, you know what, if you can, try 7. You know, it's a new time, new era, take it up a notch. But yeah, if let me just put it like this. If any listeners, if we ever meet any listeners and they're like, hey, I got 5 dried grams for you, I would eat it. But 5 dried grams haven't come into my sphere enough for me to have any experience with it.
I really enjoyed the once or twice I think that we've been able to get a hold of mushrooms. I enjoyed it tremendously. It was one of those things that, just like DMT, pretty much all of my DMT experiences have been wonderful. And I think when you're comparing plants to, say, research chemicals or things like that, there's a huge difference between the two in the feeling of them and then the feeling afterwards of them. I really enjoyed the after feeling of DMT and mushrooms. Those were 2 really, really good ones that I felt they were helping me in a lot of different ways. Whereas a lot of the research chemicals, they tend to not have that same benevolent spirit or force attached to them. But there is a time and a place for everything, and I enjoy pretty much everything. So it's oh, do we have another question here?
Can you get into your trip the more you take DMT? You can learn to actually learn and really see the world on shrooms. Yeah, on DMT, well, first of all, big distinction between smoke DMT and ayahuasca. Smoke DMT is so quick acting. Like, I think it takes you much further than mushrooms can, but it's so quick acting that you don't really get anything out of it, because by the time you're there and you realize what's going on, you're already back. Because there's this point, especially if you take 4 or 5 hits, there's this point you get to, and it's total ego loss, total just nothingness except for being in hyperspace. You don't know who you are, you don't know what your name is, etc., etc. And all this information is just being firebombed into your consciousness at that point. And you're like, whoa, okay, I got to get a grip of myself. Okay, what's going on here? Where am I? Who am I? What am I experiencing? Oh, okay, this is the hyperspace realm. This is the DMT realm. Oh, okay, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I know who I am. Wait, I'm here to get less. Oh, damn it, I'm back already. So it's like that. With ayahuasca, it's more like a mushroom trip in the sense that it's slower, and you can get really, really, really deep into it. So yes, I think it would be easier to get deep with mushrooms, because it seems like mushrooms are just more, it's a sure shot every time. With ayahuasca, there's a few different factors to it, and we've been getting mixed messages, mixed emails when it comes to the ayahuasca guide. Some people say it didn't work for them. Others say they've had the most incredible experience they've ever had, because so many different factors play into it. What you've eaten before. Did you take enough of the MAOI? Did you neutralize the stomach acids? Did you wait the appropriate amount of time between the MAOI and taking the ayahuasca brew itself? So all this plays into account. And I mean, in my personal journeys, I've had many nights that I didn't take enough of the MAOI, or it didn't work right, or something like that. So it's hit or miss. But when you can get to those deep, deep, deep states, I've never seen anything like this before. And I grew up like with a lot of LSD, a lot of MDMA, those were the two go-tos growing up. And of course, growing up, I didn't have the baseline, or I didn't have the target that I was shooting for. I didn't know it was a consciousness expanding thing. I mean, I knew it was a consciousness expanding thing, but I didn't know the extent of the consciousness expansion. It's like looking at a puddle of water and thinking that it's the ocean. I had no idea what the ocean was, just because I didn't have a reference point. But I know that with those, even like 8 hits of LSD back in the 90s, which is like the equivalent of like 20 hits now, 25 hits now. It didn't do anything close to what the ayahuasca does. And it's not necessarily that you're that much more disconnected. I mean, with LSD, I was able to disconnect myself pretty hardcore, but I always remained within myself. It was always an external kind of experience where the outer world would change. Whereas with ayahuasca, the inner world changes. You go within instead of external. With LSD, no matter how much I was tripping, I would still be able to be social. I would still be dancing. I would still be at a rave or whatever. And there wasn't that sense of ego loss ever, no matter how much I took. I always knew who I was and where I was. And as a matter of fact, I was always the designated driver too. I was the one always taking the most stuff, and they always made me the designated driver on top of everything.
He's got some stories to tell on that one too.
And nothing ever happened. Like, never got into a car accident. As a matter of fact, tripping my balls off. I was even a better driver because I was like extra cautious of everything. There was just one time when I was so out of it that we hit a curb, like we were turning, and I interpreted the size of the street, and I hit the curb and popped the tire. But that was the worst that ever happened. I don't recommend anybody does this. I'm saying, this is stupid stuff that a kid was doing 20 years ago. But it's just to kind of create that marker there. No matter how much I took, I never experienced that point of ego loss like ayahuasca.
Well, going back to this question from Mad Hatter, can you get into your trip the more you take DMT? And I think maybe he meant as you use it more and more and you have more experiences with it, is it possible to have a little bit more control over what's happening in your trips? I think that that's not as possible with DMT as it is with ayahuasca. With ayahuasca, it's like a slow ramping up to the experience. And the more you drink it, the more times that you drink it, the more practice that you get.
Oh, I see.
And being able to get into that state and being able to do the work that you want to do.
The way that it worked for me, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the right way for anybody else, but the way that I worked with it, first I let it take complete control.
Mm-hmm.
I let it take me wherever it wanted to take me. I let it break down all of my traumatic baggage, my entire ego, my entire sense of self, et cetera, et cetera. Then it got to a point where I rebuilt myself, and now I'm at a point to where I control the experience. And I control the experience from the raw consciousness element. I know who I am when I go there. I know what I'm focused on. I know what my intention is, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas before, the key was completely letting go. As a matter of fact, it was pivotal to getting to that next level, which was to let go and give into that experience. So for people at the beginning of their journey, I would say give into the experience, but it will come a point naturally, in my opinion, where you begin to take control of your experiences. And then the goal is at that point, how deep can you get? And it's funny because I first started working with ayahuasca because I wanted to maintain control over the death experience. And so many people were saying that DMT trips are very close to a near-death experience, that I thought, okay, well, if this is the closest to death that I can get, well, in a healthy way, without actually going in like, I don't know, I'm thinking of that movie Flatliners, where they're like stopping their hearts and going into the death experience and coming back. Short of doing something like that, it's the closest to a near-death experience that you can get. How deep can I take myself and still maintain control of my consciousness, who I am, et cetera, et cetera? And it's funny because that's exactly what's happened now at this point. Like, I'm so confident that when I leave this body, that I will maintain control of myself. I'll maintain control of my consciousness. I'll remember who I am, that I can navigate away from the wheel of reincarnation anywhere I want to go. And if for some strange reason, let's say that the mission doesn't get accomplished in this life, which I don't believe will be the case. I know the mission will be accomplished in this life. But let's say that I do choose to come back into the wheel. I'm pretty confident in the sense that I can return and maintain all of my memories that I've been able to obtain here and resurface from previous lives as well. And then we have these phenomena where these kids come back and they remember being, like, there's this one kid and he remembered being an Air Force pilot in World War II, and he met up with his whole battalion, and he was telling the battalion, 8-year-old kid, he was telling the battalion about personal things about themselves, and he's never met these people ever in this incarnation. So that was proof, in my opinion, that reincarnation works. And I wonder if that person had such a control of their own consciousness that they were able to come back here in this particular life and maintain all of those memories. So we're essentially like cheating the AI program and taking that power away from it, where it does the memory wipe and recycles us, which, going back to that Westworld series, that's exactly what happens is to the NPCs when they're regenerated. They get a memory wipe every time they come back into the realm. It's amazing. I don't want to say too much of it, and I haven't seen as much as Cherie has, but from the little bit that I've heard from her and the first episode that I watched, holy crap, it's all there.
Yep, it is, definitely. They're talking about earwax DMT versus the white kind. And somebody said earwax DMT is probably from bufontanine. White is from lab. No, the earwax DMT is the best in my opinion, and it comes from the way they make it, the way the person makes it versus, but it's not bufontanine. We had another really good question. Lots of questions coming in. Colin said, notice sex is never part of the trip. It shouldn't be. At least, you know, the only times that we've ever had sex on ayahuasca, it's not sex. It really is love. It's just you.
Well, there have been some times where we get really freaky afterwards.
Yeah. Oh,
but
that's
it's never
true.
during the
It's not-
experience.
yeah, and
it's after the experience.
And it's not dirty. It's not.
Sometimes it's dirty.
Well, sometimes, but most of the time, it's kind of, it's just expressing love because that's what you're feeling flowing through you, and so you just follow that feeling. I will say though that if you're trying to do any kind of spiritual work with ayahuasca, it's better to stay away from sex for at least a couple of days beforehand, because I've had a lot of experiences where the elves, the DMT elves, will show up and they're having sex with each other in all these weird kind of positions and things like that, and it's distracting at the time. And I'd rather not focus on that, and I'd rather actually get some work done. And then after the journey, then me and Chris can play around with those new positions.
That is true. If you bring sexual energy into the experience, the visions can be clouded with sexual visions.
Imagery.
Yeah. I've seen beautiful women dancing around naked and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's fun for a second, but you got it. Like it depends on your intention. Like my intention was to go in there and do some spiritual work, and I'm like, okay, this is cool, but no,
this isn't time for this.
This is not what I came here to do. So I came here to subdue my passions, not to see images of these, beautiful naked women dancing around in a psychedelic pattern.
Taylor said, this may be ignorant, but what concerns me is I've had bad trips on LSD. Is ayahuasca more natural or safer? Absolutely. Ayahuasca, mushrooms, those kinds of things, because they're natural and because we've been using them for literally thousands of years, our brains are set up to process them. And as a result, any discomfort that you feel is a natural discomfort that's going to evolve into a beautiful feeling of release and joy and being clean, feeling really, really clean afterwards. DMT time stops, so 5 minutes seems like 5 hours. It can, especially if you don't do the work first, getting the set and setting down and getting your mind in the right place. Then yes, you can get stuck in thought loops sometimes, and that usually happens when you haven't prepared your mind enough for the experience. So I would definitely say prepare. Mad Hatter said shrooms and peyote are godlike feeling. Acid feels evil for some reason. Would love the DMT trip. I completely agree. I've never tried LSD. Never came across it. But from what I understand about the chemical makeup of it versus the DMT molecule or versus, something like that, or psilocybin, the psilocybin molecule, that LSD seems to me to be a blank slate. It's like a blank CD. And that's why the CIA used it routinely for mind control purposes, because they could program it to behave however they wanted it to behave in vivo with that person. So if you wanted somebody that was not a good person and wanted to kill people, you could essentially program that into the LSD itself. Whereas with ayahuasca, and they tried using DMT and ayahuasca, they tried using mushrooms, but they found that it did the opposite of what they wanted it to do, which was it frees the mind and it prevents mind control tactics from being able to latch on. So absolutely, yes. Mushrooms and peyote and ayahuasca are very important tools that they don't want you to know about. Do you have any more questions?
I'm not sure. I'm chatting with Robert.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Robert
Wonderful.
is
he ready?
Yeah, he's ready to rock
Excellent.
and roll, and we're ready to rock and roll with him, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
I met a reptilian last night. Fonzie 1987 said, I met a reptilian last night. I think I'm going to cancel my Tinder account. Probably a good idea.
Maybe not reptilian. Like, the perspective came a little bit different for me. I think it's like NPC at this point. I've kind of, but maybe NPC is like a paintbrush catch-all term for reptilians, greys, demons, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it just encompasses them all. But it's, I know what you mean. It's like something without that sense of consciousness in them. They're like, durr. Like they just don't get it. And so, I know exactly what you mean. I'm sorry to hear that. They do come in the form of beautiful women sometimes.
Yes, they do. And they're beautiful. They may be beautiful on the outside, but
there's nothing on the inside.
There's either nothing on the inside or there's really bad things on the inside.
Yeah.
Luke Johnson said, do flashbacks qualify when reality collapses on you for no reason? I don't know. I guess you're going to have to give us a little bit more context on that one. II Captain said, anyone tried talking to Tyler, the AI system? Heard he'll respond in strange ways. And I looked this up, and apparently there is interfacing with Tyler, the controlling AI. I guess I need more information about this. So II, can you send that to me, and I will look into that for sure, because that's very interesting that it would be called Tyler. Nicholas Zerbos said, I was tripping out in Mansfield, Lillian, Texas, and out at random parties and tripping back in the last 5 years of the 90s. It was a spiritual thing. I loved every minute. I wonder if you and I ever crossed paths back then. He was tripping in Mansfield and Lillian, Texas in the last 5 years of the 90s.
I don't remember if we ever went to any parties in Mansfield. I think we went to one in a cow pasture, and the tabs that were circulating around had a 69 stamp on them. And they were the best freaking tabs I've ever had in my life. Just freaking incredible stuff. Really, really good stuff. If you had the 69s in Texas, we were probably at the same party. So there you go. What is your take on NMT?
I was just about to bring that one up.
Great question, Dakota Kemp. Do you want to take it away?
Yes, NMT. Okay, so usually when you've got ayahuasca, it's most likely the chacruna or Mimosa hostilis, and those both come from South America, and they'll have a very powerful experience, very especially the Mimosa hostilis, because it has a huge amount of DMT in it. However, Acacia confusa especially has something else called NMT along with the DMT, and it's like half NMT, half DMT instead of just full DMT. And somebody was writing on, I think it was DMT Nexus one time, and he was doing a dissertation. He was doing his dissertation on NMT and its relation to string theory. So interestingly enough, he thinks that NMT is involved with interdimensional travel, whereas DMT just puts the key in the lock of the mind to open that experience up.
Yes, and
very interesting.
I've worked with the Mimosa hostilis, and that has very, very little NMT content in it.
Right.
The chacruna actually has NMT in it, but very small amount.
Yeah.
The acacia, I noticed more interdimensional travel and contact with deities, which in hindsight, I feel that they are part of our consciousness instead. But there was definitely more of that interdimensional and ancestral connection.
Right.
So he may be onto something. I think the interdimensions are not what we think they are. They're something else. But we'll be right back.
As you step beyond the veil.
All right, Robert W. Sullivan will be joining us in T-5 minutes. But right now, I think we're going to go to the Little Twin for After Watch, or do you want to do chat room shout-outs?
Chat room shout-outs.
Chat room shout-outs,
and then
all
in
right.
the next hour, I'll do the After Watch.
Okay, you take Facebook, I'll take care of YouTube.
All right. You want to go first?
Go for it.
Hold on. All right, it looks like we've got Kirsten, Jada, Alyssa, Elizabeth McCabe.
Oh, Jada Ruse in the chat.
And Lucky. Brent Thomas, Stuart Hart, Jason Wisdom, Daniel French, Pamela Holdle, Kylie Tercy, Eric Lewis, Brian Degenace, Matthew Kubas, Cinnamon Silver, Katarina Love, Vincent Ross, Zachary Thompson, Natasha Lloyd, Tony Antonone, Zach Bradley, Rihanna Schellenbarger, Raina Simpson, Carlos Solorzano, Charla, Killian, Bill Antonson, Matt Walker, Raylene Croswell, Manda Hill, Mark Fenn, Sahar Chinyeri, and Edward Red, Mal Tanous, Daniel French, Luke Johnston is in the chat. Nicholas Zervos, of course. Couldn't forget about Nick. And now it's your turn.
Okay, fantastic. So in the TFR chat room, we have Dr. Kayak, Chat Rat George, Chris Steiner, Daryl, Dorito, Illuminati, Comet Man, Low Key, New Head Understand, Rock Castaldo, who said the why could, Brian, Don, Heal Thyself, Raykar, and many more. And of course, the badasses on YouTube, the hardcore ruffian chat room. Like, if you're in that chat room, you've got thick skin because it's unmoderated, uncensored. Sunshine On, Colin James, Heart of the Rebel, Chad Allen, Rainbow White, I Captain, Heart of the Rainbow. I already said that. Ronald Chote. Sorry, I just thought of something. Inner Self. I
thought of it too.
Did you really? Chode is an Indian word. It's not a very clean word either. I think it's chote though. So I think I mispronounced it. Sparrowless, James Young, Sunshine On, Rainbow White, Matt Hatter, Chad Allen, Jexy, of course, got a great question for Jexy for Robert as well about the 32nd degree. James Young, Sean Kemp, and Borpheus Colin. Many more too. Two more to mention. Taylor B, of course, and the list goes on. Dakota, Zach. If we didn't mention you, we apologize. There's a lot of names here to go over, and we don't want to bore you.
Rose Williams also is
definitely,
there.
And we are hitting the break as well. So we will be right back, ladies and gentlemen. We have much more coming up. Robert W. Sullivan IV is rejoining us. Esoteric Freemasonry Part 2, right here on Beyond the Veil. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome, fellow traveler, to phase 2 of the journey. The path to enlightenment begins from within and spreads outwards into the universe. As the universe is the manifestation of the essence of consciousness, no outward motion can occur without inward transformation. As such, it is up to you, the traveler, to unlock what awaits beyond the veil.
The term esoteric is defined as intended for or likely to be understood by a small number of people with specialized knowledge or interest. And this is why I've titled the show Esoteric Freemasonry, because we really go beyond the veil with Robert W. Sullivan IV, author of The Royal Arch of Enoch, Cinema Symbolism 1 and 2, and there's a new book, either recently released or in the works. I believe it's in the works, a work of fiction that is coming out. And, I love these works of fiction that contain a good amount of truth in them and based on esoteric understandings, because as we were talking about before in the movie, in the film Stranger Things, in Westworld, in so many different films, we find a recurring theme of Gnosticism. I would say it's not even Gnosticism, but it's inner gnosis that keeps on coming out in our artistic expressions. And as a result, it resonates with people a lot better. I'll give you an example. Here's a perfect example, okay? I have been reluctant to work out because it is boring as hell. I got a little VR headset and I started playing this game called Audio Shield. Now I'm actually getting a really good workout because I'm running around the room for about 20, 30 minutes at a time, hitting all these balls with the shield. And I also play another game called Space Pirate Trainer, where you're like, shooting all this stuff and dodging bullets and doing all this stuff. And my brain has been tricked now into working out, but associating that with a game. So when we have these works of fiction that are entertaining, the brain all of a sudden says, okay, wait a minute, this isn't research, but then the consciousness resonates with the truth that's being told. Star Wars is a perfect example. The main character, Luke Skywalker, he grabs the light sword, he defeats the darkness, etc., etc. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And cinema symbolism 1 and 2, from my understanding of both of the books, it's very similar to that. It's breaking down the hidden secrets and esoteric understanding that's inside of these movies, and Masonic symbolism as well, that we see right there on the big screen. And the number one thing about Masonry, in my limited understanding of what I have, is it's learning to subdue your passions, and it's learning to craft your own consciousness, your own reality through the esoteric understandings of the Egyptian mystery schools. And by using a certain set of tools, Masonic tools, for example, you have kind of a symbolism and allegory on how to better divest your consciousness of the superfluities and vices of life, for example. You develop a sense of morality, and you start squaring your actions, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to go too much into it. But it's really a completely different type of understanding than what I first believed it to be. Now, we see these tales repeated over and over and over again within film as well. A lot of the symbolism. I mean, that's just the surface stuff. What I just said. I mean, this goes really, really, really deep. Balancing the consciousness, the Osiris, the Isis, etc., the divine feminine, the masculine. It's all symbols. It's all allegory. It's all something that the consciousness resonates with, and the physical body and mind can understand. So we do have Robert W. Sullivan IV back on with us. Cherie, why don't you go through the intro real quick?
Definitely. Robert W. Sullivan IV is a philosopher, historian, antiquarian, jurist, lay theologian, mystic, radio TV personality, writer, best-selling author, CEO, and a lawyer. He's also a Freemason, having become a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason in 1999. The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism was his first published work, and was a result of 20 years of research. It's a huge book, and it's a beautiful, beautiful work. In 2014, he released Cinema Symbolism, a guide to esoteric imagery in popular movies, which was republished this year. His third book, Cinema Symbolism 2, More Esoteric Imagery from Popular Movies, was published just a few months ago. And he just finished his fictional work that he's been working on. It was released on the 5th of this month, A Pact with the Devil, Witches of Highgate, which we will be discussing tonight for the first time.
Excellent. Oh, let me get the right camera. Change
the website, once again, is robertwsullivan.iv.com.
Robert, how are you, brother?
Hey, Chris. Hi, Cherie. Thank you for having me on tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope I'm coming in okay.
Coming in loud
coming
and
in
clear.
great.
You look great too. I think this is the first time we've actually seen you on video. I'm sorry we can't send video back to you. It's all taken up by the broadcasting software that we're using. But no, looking awesome. You are working on a new book, which I just caught a little bit of it on Facebook when you posted about it. But tell us a little bit about that first, please.
Which one's that? I got 5 going on right now.
You've got 5
5?
going on. Oh my
wow.
God. You said it was a work of fiction on Facebook.
Oh, that's out. That's out.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
out. That's okay.
Yeah, it's been out for about a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the Pact with the Devil. My first work of fiction came out about 2 weeks ago. It came out December 5th. I picked that date intentionally. That's Krampusnacht. So I wanted the demonic Christmas spirit running rampant with the book. And Krampus is actually mentioned in the book as a simile, just briefly. But no, the book, the print edition is actually out right now. You can buy that anytime. The ebook, the Kindle, the Nook, that'll be out in about 2 weeks, I would think. So yeah, that's on its way. But the print edition of A Pact with the Devil is actually out right now. Like I said, it came out 2 weeks ago. I'm actually working on a prequel and a sequel to it. I'm working on another book on Masonry called Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon, and naturally Symbolism 3. I'm also working on another project, but that unfortunately I'm bound by a non-disclosure on, and I can't talk about it.
Okay. How did you decide to write a work of fiction? What was the? I mean, I can kind of guess it was the cinema symbolism, breaking all that down, and then I'm sure you drew inspiration from that research.
It was actually quite fortuitous and unusual the way this Pact with the Devil book came to exist. It actually goes back to 2013, April to be specific, and this was something I had never planned on doing. And what happened was I had released originally Royal Arch of Enoch a few months earlier, which came out in August of 2012 initially. Like Cherie said, it was ultimately republished a year ago. And then when Royal Arch came out, I started Cinema Symbolism, the original one, that I was working on. And in April of 2013, so this was right when I was pretty much in the dead middle of writing Cinema Symbolism, I had this vast dream when I was sleeping. The dream seemed to go on for hours. And I remember waking up kind of in the early morning hours, and I went over to my desk and I just started making notes about it, the characters, the character names. I remember some of the dialogue, this just vast story that I dreamt. And I just remember liking it. I was interested by it. And as I was writing Cinema Symbolism, I was just sort of started writing this on the side. It's just a side project. I came up with the title, A Pact with the Devil. I don't know why I picked that. It seemed to be ingrained in the story, although there is no pact with the devil in the actual book. The demon that they actually did this witches coven works with is not the devil. It's a high-ranking demon named Lucifuge Rofacal, and that was in the dream as well. And when I was writing Cinema Symbolism, I just did this on the side, quite literally. And then Cinema Symbolism was originally published in 2014, and I just continued writing with this. And at that point, with Cinema Symbolism 2. And I reached a point on both those books where I came to when I was about 60% through both of them, I couldn't do both of them at the same time anymore. It was too cumbersome. It was too hard to flip-flop back and forth. So I just concentrated on Cinema Symbolism 2. That came out in August 17, but while that was coming out, I ended the business relationship I was in with the company I was using. So then I had to go back and reformat, and redo. I had to re-edit and redo Cinema Symbolism and Royal Arch of Enoch to get them re-released. So that slowed everything down again. And Pact with the Devil was, when I finally got Cinema Symbolism 2 getting ready to come out, I just really concentrated hard on finishing up Pact with the Devil, which was the print edition. I was real happy with the way it came out. I'm thrilled with it. Came out, December 5th. You can get that right now. Like I said, that's available on all the major online retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It just popped up on Books A Million. And the ebook is still about 2 weeks away, but that's on its way. So, yeah, that's how the whole book came to be.
Excellent. So what is the premise of the book? You mentioned witches and covens and all that.
Right. It takes place, I don't want to give the whole story away, but certainly I'll answer your question. It takes place in modern day England, is where it starts out at. And it starts out with these young women at college at Oxford University, which is where I spent the year. The one is very interested in the occult and mysticism, and it is eventually revealed comes from a family who's been involved with the dark arts. And she recruits this other woman, this other student, one of her best friends, into helping her raise this demon so she can talk to it and eventually make a pact with it. It winds up occurring, but they're not quite ready for it. And they wind up roping another woman in, another student in to help them. And she again comes from this another family that's very involved with the dark arts. And then they wind up making a pact with it. And the story at its heart is a murder mystery. One of the witches eventually gets murdered. And there's a whole sub-conspiracy where it's revealed that the Freemasons and the Illuminati are actually working to try to shut down this witches' coven. It's revealed that these women who made this pact eventually join a larger witches' coven, which is like a satanic secret society for black magicians, and they're at perpetual war with the Freemasons, and even the Illuminati gets involved with this. So it's a great work of fiction. It's a murder mystery. I didn't want to make it joyless, so it does have some comedy in it that I think works for great effect. I liked all the characters in it, and like I said, it's available now. The print edition, it came in at 370 pages, and you can get it right now on Amazon. And at its heart, I would say it's a murder mystery. That's what I would kind of, if you ask me to sort of summarize it, boil it down to its nuts and bolts. But it definitely has horror in it. It has mystery in it. It has some erotica in it. So, and a little comedy in it from time to time. Like I said, I didn't want to make it completely joyless. So, it's out, and I'm really pleased with the way it came out. In fact, so much so that I'm actually writing I knew when I was doing this there was going to be a sequel to it, and I'm working on a sequel to it, and I'm also working on a prequel to it involving one of the characters in it. One of my favorite characters is an American witch who turns up in it, and she's quite interesting, and I really enjoyed writing her. And I'm doing a bit of a backstory on her, which ties into this, so that I'm actually working on now. And the one thing that I'll just end the question on is, because I want the audience to know this, is there's no the story concludes. There's no cliffhanger or anything like that. When you read the story, you will get a definitive ending to it. The book is 40 chapters in length, and it definitively ends a few chapters early. But in fact, the last couple chapters are just setting up the sequel. So I was very conscious of that. I didn't want to rip people off or leave them hanging, or like a cliffhanger ending. When you read it, you will get a definitive answer to what's going on in the story, and it sets up quite nicely, I believe, for the sequel. So yeah, I'm really pleased with it. I'm real happy with the way it came out. Like I said, it makes a perfect stocking stuffer for a Christmas gift. So it's available right now.
Excellent. I'm feeling, just picking up intuitively from the symbolism between the witches and the Masons. The witches seem to be emblematical, perhaps, of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is known for dark rituals, et cetera, et cetera. And the conflict between the Masons and the Catholic Church. How close am I with that feeling?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. There is hidden symbolism in the story. There is hidden meaning in the story. There are some what I would call occult mnemonics that I used in the book. It's nothing sinister, I don't believe, but I am conscious of this, and I did use it. No, I never viewed it as the Catholic Church or anything like that. In fact, pretty much I left intentionally, by and large, Christianity out of the entire story. I thought that was going to come off as cliche. I always had this vision of, like, Van Helsing waving the cross with the vampire, and I wanted to shy away from that. There's clearly two characters in this movie. There's a Freemason and there's a person who's helping him, who are kind of, investigating this witch's coven. The one guy's a Freemason. The one character is loosely modeled on me. Certainly, I'm not, I based the one character loosely, and I hashtag and underline the word loosely on me. The one, and this was the way it was in the dream, was he winds up going to England. He's from Baltimore, of course, where else? But he winds up going to England. And he allies himself with a Sunni Muslim who helps him investigate the witches, and he's very much an expert on this. And certainly the Sunnis are more interested in the mystical aspect than the Shiite Muslims are. And there is a deep nexus between Sufism, which is a mystical branch of Islam, and Freemasonry. This was something I got into in the Royal Arch. So I really like that dynamic. I somewhat stayed away from the Christian element of it because I thought it was a little tired, and I wanted that removed. The women are very vicious. They are. I don't, like I said, I don't want to give it away, but it was a little bit difficult to write in some aspects. They are very. I would definitely describe them as very evil. They do some things that are very malicious in the story. I tainted it one scene with a little comedy because I could think of no other way to write it. It was just going to become. It would just become so gloomy and dark. But no, I didn't. I never saw them as representing the Catholic Church. I divided the book. The book is split in half into two sections. They overlap, of course. The first section I actually called it the Sacred Feminine, which really focuses on them. The second half is what else but the Divine Masculine, which is where the two masculine characters take over. Now, of course, there is interweaving and overlapping, of course, but that was the way the book is modeled. You can't, unfortunately, right now, if you go find the book on Amazon, there's no free preview of it. That only gets generated once the Kindle is launched. The book is there. You can buy it, but you can't access the free preview like you can the other three. That will become available once the Kindle is launched. I've tried to, on Facebook and things, put up, I think it was about a week ago or so, I put up the entire list of the table of contents. People can go look at that. I have been promoting it on Twitter. I have been promoting it on Facebook. I haven't gone full-fledged promoting it yet for a couple reasons. It takes about 10, 11 days for the full pages to be set up on the online sites. Like for example, Books A Million, it just popped up. Amazon, it came on, but it takes time for it to come up. And again, the ebook isn't out yet. So I usually like to wait, till I go really full throttle on this until the ebook's out. But that'll be out in about 10 days or so, probably less than that, to be honest. So yeah, I'm real pleased with it. And certainly any questions you want to ask me about it, I'm open to. I would just say I don't want to give the entire story away, of course, but it was a dream. I'll just end up on this. When I was doing this, when I was writing this, I naturally researched. I was very curious to see if this had happened to any other people, if any other books were completely inspired by dreams. And of course, there were. I discovered that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was, she wrote that modeled after a dream she had. H.P. Lovecraft dreamt some of the elements of the Necronomicon. And I believe Robert Louis Stevens dreamt some of the elements of Jekyll and Hyde. So, I feel like I'm at least in good company. And I was very taken by the story. I very much enjoyed writing it. So much so that I'm working on a sequel and a prequel. And, I've talked to other people. I remember talking to, one woman, one radio host who was a spiritualist and into, mysticism. And she believed I channeled it somehow through some sort of, higher stream of consciousness. I can't say that to be the case for 100%, but I did dream it. The dream was very lucid, very specific, character names, dialogue. Very, very, very lucid dream. So like I said, I'm pleased with it, and the book's out. You can get the print edition right now if you like. If you want to wait for the Kindle, that's fine too, but that's still about a week or so away.
Excellent. Excellent. One thing I would love to see, and I don't know what it takes in order to do this, but I'd love to see audiobooks, especially of the Royal Arch. We've got a copy. It is huge. I looked at the price. I said, $33. This is a lot. Then when we got the book, we go, this is a $33 book for sure.
Right.
But the Royal Arch was originally priced, this was going back, was actually originally priced at $45. And believe it or not, at $45 when it was originally, I was basically all but breaking even with the thing. I'm with a new company now, and I get a royalty off of it. It's not killer. But it's fair. It's a fair royalty off of it. It's nearly a 700-page book. I've been involved with the printing industry now for going on almost 7 years. And I do it myself. I do everything. I do the copywriting. I do legal issues. I do the formatting. I mean, I have people help me, of course, graphic designers, editors, things like that. The Royal Arch of Enoch, at what it's priced at, is pretty much it. I really
it's well worth it. It's like 3 books
is.
in one, and it's very, very well researched. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I couldn't really go any lower than that. If you get it on Amazon, there are people. I have it at 30. I think it's around $35. I have offered it at a 55% discount. Now, not every place takes advantage of that. Amazon does lower it from time to time. I've seen it drop as low as like $28, I think, on Amazon. But there are third-party sellers that do offer it cheaper, and I do offer the Kindle for $10, which actually Amazon is discounted to $8.69, which is a steal on the thing for nearly a 700-page book. I will just wrap up by saying 2 things. One is when you're dealing with books that are over 600 pages long. And especially when you get over ones like Cinema Symbolism 2 and Royal Arch, where you're over 650, you're into a whole new reality and realm when it comes to pricing. There's really not much you can do about it. With audiobooks, unfortunately, I really can't do audiobooks with Royal Arch, and especially with the 2 movie books, because of the amount of images in them. That does not translate into an audiobook, unfortunately. I have explored this, but unfortunately, because of the images in the book, I mean, at the back of the Royal Arch of Enoch book, I think there's like 30 plates. There's images scattered throughout the text. This is true also with the 2 movie books. Because of the images, an audiobook is not feasible. Potentially, I could do one probably for A Pact with the Devil. I'd have to look into that. Right now, I'm just really concentrating on getting the ebook out. So that's where I am. But yeah, when you're dealing with books that are nearly over 600, nearly 700 pages long, you're really into a new pricing reality. And that's really, unfortunately, the price I'm stuck with. There are third-party sellers who do offer cheaper, and of course, if it's too much, I always offer the.
Fantastic. Robert, we're hitting the break, so right on the other side, let's jump back into it with Robert W. Sullivan. RobertWSullivanIV.com is the website. Check it out during the break, and we will jump into Masonry, the Royal Secret, Prince of the Royal Secret, much, much more. We've got a lot of questions from listeners, too, so don't go anywhere. We've just gotten started. Robert has put out such great work, so many different volumes of Masonic insight, and I hate to stick to the Royal Arch, but it's by far my favorite subject, and it was so many questions from listeners as well. So maybe we can get into some cinema symbolism a little bit later in the broadcast and talk about some upcoming works, but we've got a ton of questions here from listeners. One of them has to do with Albert Pike. Now, Robert, I've likened you in the past to kind of a modern day Albert Pike. I mean, you've really documented Freemasonry. You've really shined a lot of light, and that's what it's all about, is shining light. You've shined a lot of light on the subject, on the good and bad. You come from a completely non-biased perspective as well, which I really, really respect. And it really made me take Freemasonry seriously and completely shut off all of the conspiracies, because it's the first instinct of a quote-unquote truther, which I used to be, to fall into all the conspiracies. And then you got to get yourself out of that. And when you really lift the veil, you realize, wait a minute, things are completely skewed, and a lot of the talking points are propaganda, a lot from the Catholic Church, a lot from the Christian churches as well. There's been Christian churches that have banned Freemasonry. The Catholics banned Freemasonry going back to the time of Cardinal Ratzinger. Then he became Pope, and Freemasonry was just recently unbanned, but for a period of time there, you couldn't be a Mason and a Catholic at the same time. You couldn't have a Catholic burial, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead, Tree.
I was actually going to bring that up in the last segment, that the fact that he's focusing in the fictional book that he just wrote about witchcraft, that the fact that he's focusing on that very real fact that Freemasons have been accused since they started of witchcraft. And that was one of the main things that they've been trying to get away from. And so whenever you have real witches practicing real witchcraft, then who better to kind of go up against them but the Freemasons? Because the Freemasons are the group that's scapegoated, that's blamed for things that they didn't do, et cetera, et cetera. And so, of course, there's going to be that dichotomy between the two. So.
Well, it's the antagonist pointing the finger at everybody else, saying they're the antagonist.
Exactly.
We've seen this method used time and time again.
Right.
But we just went through a list last week of countries that have banned Freemasonry or periods in time where Freemasonry was banned. And it goes all the way from Hitler to Pol Pot to, maybe not Pol Pot, who's the other guy? Stalin.
Stalin, yeah.
There's dictators have banned Freemasonry because Masons have kind of been there to provoke change.
When it's necessary.
In the United States, this country was founded by Masons, and they were escaping a tyrannical government and forming their own country.
Right.
And it's funny because the 1776ers, they'll stand up very, very proud about the Constitution and about the formation of this country, et cetera, et cetera. And out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying that Freemasons are the root of all evil. Well, wait a minute. Why are they root of all evil? Because they hijack governments. Okay, well, when do they hijack governments? When the governments are out of line. You see this historically. It's not just a theory, but it's something you see historically. So dictators knew to ban Freemasonry. But I'm getting a little bit off point here. The point is Albert Pike, and one of our listeners, Matt Hatter, he asked how close. Oh, well, hold on. No, that's a different question that he asked. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Give me just 1 second. I just lost this.
Well, someone said that Freemasons and the Catholic Church are in bed together.
Here it is, right here.
They never have been. No.
Sorry. Okay. Can you please ask Robert if all Freemasons go by Albert Pike's beliefs, and how strongly is Albert Pike tied into Freemasonry? And I just found this out just the other day, but there's actually a couple of different books called Morals and Dogma written by different authors. So, Robert, how closely tied in is Albert Pike to Masonry?
Right. He was a Grand Sovereign Commander of the Scottish Rite from 1859 until his death in 1891. He is not the creator of the Scottish Rite. He is often credited with that. That is 100% false. The Scottish Rite comes into existence in May of 1801 under the guy who's considered the founder is a man named Frederick Dalcho. Albert Pike is not even born yet. He is important. He becomes a Freemason. He becomes an Odd Fellow. Years before he joined the Scottish Rite, he becomes the Grand Sovereign Commander, I want to say in 1859. He writes a book that comes out in 1871 that is heavily plagiarized from the works of Eliphas Levi, a French transcendental magician, Morals and Dogma. The book has nothing to do with Freemasonry. It's about comparative religion and comparative symbolism. It doesn't reveal really Masonic secrets or anything like that. What Pike does in the book is he goes through the Scottish Rite structure and the Blue Lodge. It's a very good book. It's really about comparative symbolism and comparative religion and things like that. And he gets into the book and he says, like for example, when I mean, I'll just go with an easy one, like the sun. He says, well, in the Pythagorean mystery schools, the sun meant this, and in Freemasonry it meant this, and in Mithraism it meant this, and in Christianity it meant that, and in Judaism it means this, and then he'll go to Kabbalah, and Kabbalah it means this, and in Mithraism it means this. And it's just this list. It's just this constant, endless book about comparative religion and comparative symbolism. The axe. In Mithraism it means this, in the Eleusinian mysteries it meant this, in the early religions of Great Britain it meant that, in Druidism it means this. It's just this endless comparative religion, comparative mythology study that Pike goes on in the book. If you're interested in that subject matter, and I appreciate you comparing me to Albert Pike. When I was writing Royal Arch, the the two books that I modeled Royal Arch of Enoch after, one was Pike's Morals and Dogma, the other was Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings. Both books were very influential on me. I like Pike's work. I like the book. He is a whipping boy in the conspiracy world because in an 800-page book, he compares the planet Venus to Lucifer, and it's a correct comparison. In the early morning sky, in the eastern sky, the planet Venus can often be seen heralding the coming sunrise. It sits in the eastern sky, and a lot of times you'll see the sun coming up right behind it. And it's false light. This is why it associates with Lucifer. The real light is the sun. The false light is Venus. This is why, it's the false light, the false god, or the fallen god. It's the real light is the sun. And that's all he says in the book. He says, and he even says, this is a weird name. He says, strange name to give to the Prince of Darkness. Is it Lucifer that bears the light? Doubt it not. He could have just as easily have said, is it Venus that bears the light? Is it Venus that announces the coming sunrise?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's the same comparison. But people have picked up on this to mean that this is some Luciferian doctrine. This is not at all what Pike meant. But there it is. But yeah, I mean, it
seems like we have to clear that up on every single show because there's somebody that asked that question. Another gentleman here said that Masons don't believe in Christ, and it's funny because in order to be a Knights Templar, you have to take an oath to protect the teachings and beliefs of Jesus Christ. And I don't know if you're at liberty to discuss the three great lights of Masonry or not, but if you can discuss those, then I think that sheds a lot of light on what's going on.
Right. Well, the Bible is what's considered one of the great lights of Masonry, and you certainly Christians can join Freemasonry. There is absolutely no prohibition against Christians from joining Freemasonry, no more than there is a Jewish person or a Muslim, or someone, a Hindu, for instance. The path with what Masonry is it's deist. You have to believe in a supreme being. It leaves the pathway to the supreme being to the individual Mason. Certainly, if you get into some more conservative strains of Christianity, this doesn't necessarily go over well. If you're into a more moderate strain of Christianity, it's really no problem. The reason for this is because Jesus Christ is never invoked in the lodge, but neither is Yahweh or Jehovah or Allah. It's just referred to as God or the great architect. However, whatever path you get there is up to you. None of that is ever invoked in a Masonic lodge. The York Rite, once you become a third degree Blue Lodge Freemason, two high degree paths are opened up to you. They are completely voluntary. You do not have to join them. You can join both. You can join neither. It is 100% up to you. There are other auxiliary bodies, but the two that everyone know are the Scottish Rite and the York Rite. They run parallel. They do definitely run parallel, but the one thing that's unique with the York Rite that you really won't find in any other body in Freemasonry is the end body. The end group of the York Rite is the Knights Templar, which does require a Christian confession to join. You have to be a Christian exalted to the Holy Royal Arch in order to join the Knights Templar. You will find nothing like this in the Scottish Rite or anything like that. So that does distinguish itself. But, there is no prohibition in Freemasonry about, prohibiting Christians from joining or anything like that. Certainly, Christians are welcome, but,
correct me if I'm wrong, but in every lodge in the United States, there's a Holy Bible right in the middle of it. Every lodge in the United States. I mean, in Muslim countries, it's the Quran. In Jewish countries, it's the Torah. But in the United States, it's all the Bible.
Right. You will find the Bible on the altar in, every Masonic lodge. Loads of Masonic trestle boards and things like that are always depicting the Bible. I have been told, I've never experienced this, that if you are raising a Muslim, that the Bible will be substituted out with the Quran. That has been documented. But there would be no objection to that or anything like that. I when I was initiated, it was the Bible. The Bible is always there. So yeah, I mean, there's no, like you, I've heard these, the rumors that, the book on the altar is like the Albert Pike book or something. I mean, that's all. Yeah, I mean, that's all total nonsense. I mean, if you're gonna put the Albert Pike book there, put my book next to it. So yeah, I mean, again, there's so many, conspiracy. I mean, this was one of my motivations for writing the Royal Arch of Enoch book. I mean, there's so many bogus conspiracies out there, but it enveloped in this, there was some true conspiracies. And there was, people, there was truth to the, architecture in Washington, D.C. and the Masonic symbolism on college seals and logos. It was never placed there, though, with this motivation. I mean, there was always this underlying thing with this that, was being placed there for some sort of nefarious demonic purpose. That was not the case. Now, the problem with it was there was no transparency with it. The guys just went ahead and did it. And this is, I think, what has given this credence to this belief that there is this overarching hidden demonic conspiracy going on. The people who founded this country, who created it, were using Freemasonry and its symbolism and its philosophies and its rituals to craft the country around. So that's exactly what they did. And you will find the symbolism everywhere. And if you're interested in this, by all means, check out the Royal Arch of Enoch book. I mean, I get into it very in deep, much more in deep than I'm talking about it right now. But there was no transparency. They just went ahead and did it. And I think this is where, this whole notion comes from of that there's this, vast demonic conspiracy going on. It was never ever intended to be evil. It was always Enlightenment values. It was, Renaissance values, Hebrew Kabbalah, Christian Kabbalah, biblical imagery, mystical imagery. No question about that. But there was no transparency. They just went ahead and did it. And I think that's where some of the negative aspects with it is. I'm a Mason, so I have no problem with it. But it does take time to figure out. And again, when you start breaking down and studying the Masonic symbolism, then your eyes will start opening, saying, "Oh, okay, now I understand why this is here, and this symbol is here, and it's not associated with this, but it is associated with that." It's a very deep study, and again, it's in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. So, yeah, something fascinating. But yeah, the Bible you will find on all the altars in Masonic lodges.
Excellent. Another question from a listener. Does Robert believe what Pike says about the 3 world wars? And if I can chime in on this for just a moment. First of all, that quote was completely fabricated. It was actually taken from a conspiracy book. And the guy who had actually, the original incarnation of it was completely fabricated. But then that quote was also plagiarized, and then it was changed to make it say Islam and a couple of other things in Third World War, et cetera, et cetera. But to my understanding, that quote is completely made up. Your thoughts, Robert?
Yeah, it's fake. It's fake news, as they would say.
Yeah. Propaganda.
It was made up by a guy named William Guy Carr. And there was this whole idea, this whole Lucifer quote by Albert Pike bred this conspiracy that there was this high secret group of Freemasons. These guys were, this is the guys who identify with the Illuminati, which had been defunct. That this was this Luciferian satanic cabal going on in Freemasonry. This is all total fiction. This was created by a guy in the 18th century, in the late 18th century, named Leo Taxil. And he wrote a treatise called The Secrets of the Freemasons, where he alleged within Freemasonry there was this secret Illuminati group that were secretly devil worshippers, hell-bent on taking over the world. It was a hoax. He came out. It's been completely debunked. The guy who wrote it made it up start to finish. Unfortunately, people still want to believe it and pick up on it. William Guy Carr was one of them. And the whole Albert Pike the letters that are predicting 3 world wars are fabrications. They're made up. They don't exist. They're just complete fabrications from start to finish. Unfortunately, there are people out there who still want to believe this, but it's fiction. I will say that the Illuminati of Bavaria was real. I mean, they did exist. I talk about them in the Royal Arch of Enoch. Of course, people like Adam Weishaupt and Xavier Wack and people like that, they are defunct. They don't exist anymore. There was an Illuminati element and component that did seep into the country in its early days. This was through a man named DeWitt Clinton, who has literally been written out of our history pages, out of our history books. He is very critical to understanding the Masonic influence in the United States. In fact, he's the guy who is pulling the strings on all of it. So no, Pike. Just to get back to the question, the whole thing with Pike, with the 3 World Wars, is a fabrication. No Mason believes it. I mean, I believe pretty much it's been completely debunked and disproven. But unfortunately, people still want to cling to it and hang on to it.
Well, it's much easier to believe a meme on Facebook than it is to actually open up a book and actually read it. I remember just recently an Albert Pike quote came up, and it said page 108 of Morals and Dogma, and I said, let me go check this out. I turned to page 108, nowhere to be found. All the text was completely just made up and fabricated in this meme that's circulating around Facebook. But these are the type of things, though, Robert, that made me change my perspective completely 100%. And if the listeners out there, the ones who actually want to do the research, want to look beyond the veil, I think this is what makes things start to fall apart for them. So this is completely invaluable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, another thing that's bogus that you'll hear all the time out there is Albert Pike invented the Ku Klux Klan. Totally false. He was a Northerner. I mean, there's another thing that you'll hear is Albert Pike was a Southerner. And he fought for the Confederacy. True, he did fight for the Confederacy, but he was not a Southerner. He was from Boston, Massachusetts. So unless you consider Boston, Massachusetts in the Confederacy or part of the South, then I guess he was a Southerner. He was what was known as a Copperhead. Those are Northern Democrats who supported the Confederacy during the Civil War. He does fight for the Confederacy, but he has nothing to do with the Ku Klux Klan. He didn't found it. It was founded, I believe, in 1865 by 5 ex-Confederates in Pulaski, Tennessee. Pike was never there. There is probably some truth that, I mean, one of the early Grand Wizards, the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan was a man named Nathan Bedford Forrest. Pike would have known him, but that's certainly, you want to call it guilt by association, that's fine, but that certainly doesn't put Pike in the Ku Klux Klan. So no, Pike founding the Ku Klux Klan, this is all, again, completely bogus, 100% false, never happened. So yeah, when it comes, it's so funny to me because, it's not funny. That's not the right word, but a lot of the people who are stoking the conspiracy stuff, they're totally oblivious to the real, to DeWitt Clinton. Who is the guy? That is the guy who is pulling all the Masonic strings behind in the conspiracy world in the United States, but no one talks about him. You get into, some of the Masonic symbolism in the architecture. Some people know. Washington, D.C., one of the greatest Masonic undertakings in this country that none of these guys talk about is the Erie Canal. That is an entirely Masonic construction project from start to finish. Union College of Schenectady, New York, is a completely Masonic architectural project. The downtown template of Baltimore, Maryland was Freemason. No one talks about this stuff. Everyone comes back to this banality of Albert Pike, who is minor, in the world of Freemasonry. He's important in the Scottish Rite. The book's important, but when you're getting into developing Masonry in the United States, this stuff was long done. A lot of it before Pike even, was born. But for some reason, and I just think it's probably the Albert or the Lucifer quote. Everyone just seems to love coming back to Albert Pike, and like I said, it's important. It's an important book. Morals and Dogma, I believe, is credited as being the first book in the United States published about comparative religion. So it is an important book. But if you really want to get into the deeper Masonic symbolism, especially in the United States, you'll find Pike, is a minor player in all this.
Well, one of the chatters mentioned that their grandfather was a 32nd degree. He was the nicest person in the world, and he left him 82 acres of land as well. My grandfather was also a Mason. His brother was a Mason as well. They were old school, though. They never talked about it. We didn't find out until after he passed away. We found his Masonic items and things like that. But these, my grandfather, for example, he was the type that walked into a room and everybody was quiet and listen to what he had to say. He was a man of very few words, and when he said, held so much weight. I mean, he had this sense of, he commanded respect without saying a word. And if that's what Masonry turns you into, then wow. I mean, he was the role model of what a man should be like to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely, improved my life. I feel like I'm better off from joining. It put me on a path to writing these books. I can tell you and the listeners or the viewers right now that none of my books would exist but for my membership in Freemasonry. I mean, there's no way in hell I could have written a 700-page book on Freemasonry and its symbolism without being a Freemason, without understanding the rituals, without going through the rituals, both in the Blue Lodge and the High Degree, and especially the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, which is really critical to understanding a lot of the symbolism, a lot of the history in the country. So yeah, I mean, now that's what I got out of it. But certainly people go through it and may take something completely different away from it, and that's fine as well. But no, I really do enjoy, cherish my membership. I'm thrilled that I was able to go through it. I mean, for me, it's been 20 years now. So, I've been involved with it forever. And I mean, I've been asked this before on other shows. I don't mind saying it. I've been involved with the Blue Lodge since 1996, with Scottish Rite since 1999. So almost 18 years there. 19 years going on. In all my years involved with this, I've never seen any, dark cabal controlling the world or even trying to. I mean, I've seen important, Masonry is important. I've seen community involvement. I've seen, its symbolism being used, its philosophies being used, even in today, I've seen that, but I've never seen any sort of secret, devil worshiping group of Masons hell-bent on taking over the world. I guess if it's there, I've yet to discover it, but I never have, and I don't believe it exists. I don't believe it existed then. I don't believe it exists now, but I do believe it is influential, and I do believe to this day it is.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Much more coming up. On the other side, I want to get into Skull and Bones. Is that a Masonic organization, or is it something completely different? And we'll get into some of the higher degrees of Masonry as well, the Scottish Rite, the York Rite, and go to all your great questions. But we've got some great commentary in the chat room. Krobi-Wan says her uncle was a Freemason, her aunt is an Eastern Star, all great people. I mean,
we need to talk about
that's
Eastern
the
Star
fact
too.
of the matter here, is that everybody I've met who's a Mason or a Eastern Star or something like that have been incredible people. It's completely opposite to what I thought it was. We'll be right back.
www.beyondtheveilradio.com.
After my long journey, I finally stood on the threshold of enlightenment.
You are listening to Beyond the Veil with Chris and Sherry Teo on iHeartRadio.
T-minus 60 seconds and counting.
Welcome, fellow traveler, to phase 3 of this journey. Here you will experience an even deeper level of understanding as we traverse through the boundaries of hyperspace consciousness. Here, you will find that reality is altered with a single thought and a single intention. Set your intention now and prepare to travel deeper. Beyond the veil.
All right, we will be rejoining Robert again in another 5 minutes. Cherie has Astro Watch for us. I do want to address, though, we have like Mad Hatter in the chat, And, you know, I totally understand all of these questions that are, you know, like, what about the Masons in New York City that killed that dude during a ceremony? We've covered all this time and time again. I don't want to make this a redundant show. Please check out the previous shows with Robert W. Sullivan that we've been able to do, and it covers all of these questions that you're asking. I will say this. I've heard about that incident in New York City, and apparently they were doing a ritual that required a blank to be used, a gun with a blank, and one of the people in there, they were carrying a gun on them, and they accidentally reached for their real gun, and this was like a 90-year-old guy who was doing this. He reached for his real gun instead of the gun with the blanks. And to my understanding, that part of the ritual, number one, shouldn't have been done. It was unique to that particular lodge. And number two, nobody does that anymore because of that particular incident.
Right.
It was investigated. It was determined to be an
accident.
And the person who was killed, they didn't have any kind of weird connections or anything like that. So if there was some kind of connection behind the person that was killed, or, you know, they were trying to silence that person for one reason or another, that paints a whole different story.
Right.
But that's not the case. So you've got to look at the entire picture instead of just the one particular incident and say, okay, well, you know, sometimes stuff happens, and it's just simple as that. But let's go to Astro Watch real quick.
Okay. The new moon in Sagittarius on December 18th is going to be square Chiron. So we carry this message of healing and suffering into this lunation. Sagittarius, though, is a happy-go-lucky sign, reminding us that there are many paths to joy despite our pain. The moon is conjunct Saturn, who is on the very last degree of Sagittarius, exactly where Mercury stationed retrograde. Once again, the universe highlights the Sabian Pope degree, encouraging us to count our blessings. A wide conjunction to loving Venus suggests that values are intimately connected to our belief system. The more open our hearts, the more expansive and inclusive our worldview becomes. On December 20th, we experience the biggest shift of the year as Saturn enters home sign Capricorn, where he will stay until 2020. Themes of accountability and responsibility arise from this powerful transit. Positively, we're ready to get real, grow up, and use our time on Earth wisely. Negatively, we could be looking at austerity, depression, and limitation. Whatever manifests, it's about taking it as it comes, practicality, and finding ways to manage ourselves more effectively. While Saturn gets a bad rap, ultimately his function is mastery of difficult circumstances and wisdom born out of experience. The Sun follows Saturn into Capricorn on December 21st, our anniversary and the winter solstice. Whether you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern, it's to the light we all turn. Here in the north, we are welcoming back the sun as the days begin to grow longer. For those in the south, the light of the sun blazes at peak intensity. The sun represents our center and is a symbol of the creative force in the world. Wherever you are, take a moment during the day to place your hand on your solar plexus and focus on breathing in sunlight. Imagine you're filled with the light of the sun. Winter solstice blessings to everyone out there.
Definitely. The 21st is a very, very, very special day on so many different levels.
Yeah.
So maybe our friend Dave out there can make it even more special. Still trying to arrange all of that, but we'll see. We'll be right back. Much more coming up right here on Beyond the Veil.
My dear traveler, remember this. Whatever plane our consciousness may be acting in, both we and the things belonging to the plane are, for the time being, our only realities. However, if we mistake the shadows for realities, we find ourselves confusing the upward progress of the ego as an elevation of consciousness. Thus, beware of oneself when you step beyond the veil.
All right, we've gone through all the first level stuff in the first hour. Now let's get into the deep, deep, deep stuff here. Robert, I have a question for you regarding Skull and Bones. I don't know too much about this fraternity. I know that they use the Skull and Bones. Now, I was recently watching a documentary, and they were saying that the Skull and Bones was actually a symbol of the Knights Templar. And if I remember correctly, it had something to do with Hiram Abiff and the way that they buried him with the skull and the two bones, or maybe that was a burial type of ritual, and that's where the pirate flag came in, and the Knights Templar would also fly the pirate flag. I'm remembering it all convoluted though, so maybe you can shine some light on this. Any thoughts on that fraternity and its relation to Freemasonry?
Right. That seems right to me also with what you're describing. I'd have to go pull a book off the shelf, but just off the top of my head, what you're talking about, the Templars, with Hiram Abiff, you'll find a skull and crossbone on a lot of Masonic trestle boards as well. I mean, what you're saying rings true to me. But again, I'd have to go look for the specifics. Skull and Bones is not, it's a group. It's a college fraternity at Yale University. There are other ones there. Skull and Bone gets all the raps, gets all the rap, but there's other ones there as well, such as Scroll and Key and Wolf's Head. People don't know those, but there are other fraternities at Yale. It is what I would call is Masonic-like. It is not associated with Freemasonry proper, either the Blue Lodge or the High Degrees. But it was founded by William Huntington Russell. You're more probably appropriate to call this thing the Russell Trust. I want to say it was founded in the year that I believe that comes to mind is 1821. But again, I'd have to go look that up for certain. But it's a Masonic-like secret society. You have to be a student at Yale, and I think you can only join it in your last 2 years. They select people coming into their junior year, and if they select you, you're a Skull and Bone. You're in Skull and Bones your junior and senior year, and then you leave, of course. So it kind of differ. Like when I was at Gettysburg, you could join a fraternity house. I believe it was after your freshman year. So you go into it in your sophomore, junior, and senior year. I believe it's Skull and Bones. It's only the last 2 years you're allowed to do it, but I'd have to look that up. But it's a secret society. It has rituals. There's a lot of rumors and innuendos around with it. I'm not a member of it, so I've never been in the tomb or anything like that. So you probably know as much about it as I do. They're supposed to have, I don't know what, the skull of Geronimo in there. I've heard rumors about the ritual. It sounds very Masonic-like. I believe there was like a death and resurrection at some point in time. That there's characters dressed up. It's Masonic. There are characters.
Well, a lot of people, a lot of organizations have borrowed from Masonry.
Right.
The Mormon Church, for example, we just did a show with Brooks Agnew, and he came out of nowhere and said that he's been a Mason since he was 19 years old, and he's a member of the LDS. So I was like, wow, okay, great. And so he gave us the insight on literally everything.
The OTO as well.
No, I don't. He's not a member of the OTO.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the OTO has kind of drawn a lot from Freemasonry.
Yeah. And these are all groups outside, but in the Mormon Church, for example, you have all the tokens, you have the word, you have et cetera, all stolen from Masonry. So it's not surprising that we find these other organizations that are very similar, and people can often get them confused.
Oh, absolutely. Skull and Bones. Any college or fraternity, whatever one is Masonic-like. When I was at Gettysburg, I was a brother of a fraternity named Lambda Chi Alpha, and Lambda Chi Alpha's ritual was very Freemasonic. I joined Lambda Chi Alpha obviously before, and I joined Freemasonry. But the guy who wrote the Lambda Chi Alpha ritual was a Freemason. So you'll find that with a lot of the college fraternity structures. The guy who founded the college fraternal system, John James Beckley, was a Freemason. Anytime you're dealing with a fraternal order, by and large, you're going to find a Masonic, parallel. No question about it. That's what, whether it's the Odd Fellows, college fraternities, Skull and Bones, the OTO, you name it. you are probably going to find a Masonic parallel in there somewhere.
I have a theory on what the 322 stands for Skull and Bones. I mean, just considering the possibility that it's an elite organization, because we see a lot of quote-unquote elites. I'm doing bunny ears as I say this. Quote-unquote elite in that fraternity. If you look at Colossians 3:22 in the Bible, it says, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything and do it, not only when their eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord." I think that it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek 322 about how they rule the world.
Yeah, I've heard rumors about it. Certainly a lot of Skull and Bones people who have left it have become very influential. And we have 3 presidents who were in Skull and Bones. So, yeah, I mean, 322, I've heard different things on it. I mean, what you're saying, I've heard it's a year. It could be 322 BC or even 322 AD or CE. I've also possibly the date, March 22nd, the vernal equinox, the resurrected sun. So yeah, I mean, I've heard all that as well. But again, I'm sure there's some meaning to it. I know there is, but you'd probably have to join it to figure it out. I remember seeing on some documentary they had some insider who I can't remember what it did. It had something to do with the Bible or a year or something, but I just can't recall off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times, as you very well know, when you're dealing with symbolism, there's usually more than one meaning. So if there were multiple meanings to 322, that would not surprise me in the least at all.
Oh, it's multidimensional for sure. Every symbol is multidimensional and based upon the understanding of the observer. And some symbols are crafted like that to mean one thing to somebody who's at a certain level and mean a completely other thing to somebody that's another level. It's something that I've learned in this time. So what does Robert attribute some of these lodges going rogue to, is a question coming out of the chat. And I would say this. I've been reading about the 3rd degree initiation, and there is actually something in the obligation. From what I understand, I don't know, I've never gone through it, so I don't know if this is real or not, but in the obligation, it says that the Master Mason will not attend an initiation in a clandestine lodge. And there's a lot of clandestine lodges out there that have gone, completely outside of a regularly constituted lodge, and they're not in the actual body of Masonry. They've started their own thing. Am I correct in that?
Right. I don't know what the question means by going rogue, but when you join a Blue Lodge of Masons, the first thing you want to make sure is that the lodge is under the aegis of the Grand Lodge of the state. And that can be readily found out. That's very easy to find out. If it is not, it is what is called a clandestine lodge. And when you go through the Blue Lodge degrees, assuming you're going through of a legitimate Blue Lodge temple, one of the things you cannot do, or one of the things you promise not to do, is sit in a lodge of clandestine Masons. And what's that? Well, that's people holding themselves out to be Freemasonry that's not recognized. So you're allowed to join other fraternal orders, as long as you can join things like the Odd Fellows, but they don't claim to be Freemasonry. So that's okay. Certainly, you can join Masonic bodies that are recognized, such as York Rite, Scottish Rite. In Baltimore, one of the real popular ones that's recognized is called Yed's Grotto. That loads of the brothers in my lodge are part of Yed's Grotto. That's recognized. If you have a question about it, or you are asked to join it, you can always go to the Grand Lodge and ask them. They'll know. I mean, they'll know or should be able to find out for you. So things that are okay, what would be something that would be clandestine that's not recognized? The Illuminati. Anybody holding themselves out as some Illuminati group. This is just made up. This is just this person making it up on his own. This would be like me getting on an airplane and flying, to Chris, to wherever you and Cherie are, and saying, okay, well, we're now the Illuminati. Right. Well, are we? We could say anything we want to. Another group that you hear bandied about from time to time are these high degrees of Masonry, called the Rites of Memphis Mizraim. And this is like supposed to be degrees like 33 through like 360 or something. They did exist. They do. I mean, you can read about them. They did exist at one point in time. They are not recognized by any Masonic organization, so that would be something that would be clandestine. So yeah, I mean, you can join if you become a Freemason, you can join other fraternal orders. You can even join fraternal orders that are outside of Freemasonry, but you're not supposed to join lodges that are holding themselves out as Masonry that are not. That's what's called a clandestine lodge.
And I think that's important for people to understand, because there could be groups out there with evil agendas, et cetera, that may be flying the banner of Masonry, but are not, and it don't have anything to do with at least a regularly constituted lodge.
Oh, I agree. Completely 100% accurate. If you are interested in joining a group of Freemasons, the lodges are pretty easy to find, and you want to make sure it's under the aegis of the Grand Lodge. Again, that's pretty easy to find. A lot of bogus, lodges. I mean, there's one out there called like the Grand Lodge of the United States. That's not real. If you read the fine print, quite literally, they tell you that. I remember going to one website, and if you scroll down to the bottom, I mean, at the bottom, there's the, little disclaimer, this is not, this, I mean, quite literally, it said, we are not part of any, state Grand Lodge system or anything like that. So a lot of times they will tell you, I mean, and that is what I would call that is pure clandestine Masonry. As long as the body is recognized, you're fine. You won't have a problem. But if it's not recognized, then you could get into trouble with it. And again, you can join other fraternal orders that are not Masonic. You're just not supposed to join ones that are holding themselves out to be Freemasonic that are not.
Fair enough. So I want to talk about the Rosicrucians here for a second, because we have a question in relation to this. But to my understanding, I used to believe that the Rosicrucians were a separate group, or maybe something similar to the Scottish Rite. But to my understanding, it's actually a degree within the Scottish Rite. Am I correct in that?
Well, yes and no. There are the degrees in the Scottish Rite, I believe, called the degrees of the Rose Cross, and this is being lifted from the Rosicrucians, which when I'm talking about the Rosicrucians, I'm talking about the historical Rosicrucians. These are the guys, running around in the 1500s, the 1600s, John Dee, Valentin, these guys who are into this mystical blend of Protestantism and alchemy. Though the historical Rosicrucians, now there are modern day Rosicrucian groups that claim descent from these people and from this historical group, but there's really no nexus that can be necessarily formed, which is fine. But just as long as you understand that, you could join a Rosicrucian body, because I don't believe they hold themselves out as Freemasonic. So again, that would be permitted. There are degrees in the Scottish Rite that that do reference the historical Rosicrucians. That's 100% true. The historical Rosicrucians, you will clearly find, what I would call in the book, what I call in the Royal Arch of Enoch book, sort of proto-Freemasons. I mean, you will definitely find, a secret organization, promoting Enlightenment ideals. You can clearly see a nexus, between these people and the Masonic, the Freemasons of 1717. I think that's pretty irrefutable. But it's again, when you throw around the term Rosicrucian, that can mean a lot of different things. You can be talking about the historical ones. You can be talking about these, neo-Rosicrucians. You can be talking about the Scottish Rite degrees that name themselves after the historical Rosicrucians. So it's it's there, no question about it.
Let me jump to the question from Jaxie. So she asked, do you know anything about the Rosicrucians and how the Roman Empire took Hermetic principles for themselves and turned it into fascism? Can you speak a little bit about the seven Hermetic principles?
Well, again, it's the Rosicrucians. When you say Rosicrucians to me, I think of the historical, characters, the historical Rosicrucians, the ones in the 1700s, the 1600s, the guys flirting around with alchemy. Those are the Rosicrucians that come to mind. And clearly these are, what I would call the proto Freemasons. There's definitely a tie-in between Freemasonry and the historical Rosicrucians. You can find, hijacking of hermetic principles all over the place. You can find this. I mean, you could argue that the Catholic Church and Christianity is hijacking the mystery school teachings. You could find this routine all over the place. I mean, you could find parallels with the story of Jesus, with the Egyptian mysteries, or the Eleusinian mysteries. Clearly the Christian holidays are solar in nature, and it gets into Neoplatonism with, Jesus being the solar God-man, and the 12 apostles being the 12 houses of the zodiac, and, Christmas being a celebration of the winter solstice, and Easter being the vernal equinox. So you can look at a hijacking of that as well. I mean, Hermetic principles, certainly, you can find Hermeticism in naturally Freemasonry. You can find it in Christianity. You can find it in Christian Kabbalah, which is a take on Hebrew Kabbalah. So, it's a broad subject here. I'm painting with broad brushes, but yeah, I mean, with Christianity, with Judaism, these Abrahamic faiths, they all have a mystery school or a mystical component of them. This is pretty irrefutable. When you're getting into, now fast forwarding to the 20th century, when you're getting into things like Nazism and fascism, clearly, with the Third Reich, you will obviously again find mystical blends on this. You can look at the SS as being a hijacking of the Jesuits, Himmler being interested in, obtaining the holy artifacts. Clearly, you have a perversion of the teachings of Madame Blavatsky, by Nazi thinkers. I mean, some of the names, Jorglans, von Lebensfeld, von List. These were sort of the early influential guys on Hitler. So you will find, a mystical, a darker mystical component on that as well. So, yeah, I mean, when it gets into Hermeticism and the Hermetic arts, this goes back in time, and you will find their influence, all over the place, their fingerprints all over the place. And certainly the Christian Church, Catholicism, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, they're not immune from it in any way, shape, or form.
Let me jump to a question from Heart of the Rebel. Can you speak a little bit about the Masonic concept of Prince of the Royal Secret?
Right. Well, that's the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite. This is the part of the Kadash degree system. This is the end part of the of the Scottish Rite. It has, it's sort of the wrapping up of the Scottish Rite. It sort of welcomes you into the Scottish Rite. It's been a while since I've seen the degree and gone through it. So, I'm probably, my interest in the high degree system really rested with the highest degree of all, which is the 13th in the Scottish Rite, the 7th in the York Rite. The number system is out of order in the Scottish Rite. A lot of people are not aware of this. Numerically, the 32nd and the 33rd degree are the highest, of course, but symbolically and philosophically of importance, the 13th degree is the end of the Scottish Rite. The Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. This is the 7th degree in the York Rite. That's really the highest degree in Freemasonry. That's the ritual where all the symbolism is coming out of. If you understand what's going on in the Blue Lodge and you understand what's going on in this, in this ritual, it's the end of the Masonic story. A lot of the high degree rituals. In the Scottish Rite actually then take place before the Royal Arch of Enoch. You go back in time. So the degree structure of the Scottish Rite is somewhat out of order. I would say, it's been a while since I've gone through the 32nd. It's the end of the Scottish Rite. It has a Templar element to it as well. I remember that. But, when you're dealing with the high degree system, you want to really concentrate on the 13th in the Scottish Rite and the 7th in the York Rite. Those are the highest degrees. That's where everything's coming out of.
A Heart of the Rebel also added to that is the secret of the 32nd degree that the individual can become a Christ.
No, that happens in the 13th degree. I drill it. 13 is the most important degree in the Scottish Rite, and it's the 7th in the York Rite. That's where you want to turn to, not the 32nd.
Okay.
Awesome. That resonates with me totally because,
and that's why the number 13 is all over the Great Seal. It's
Mhm.
falling on this 13th degree. The degree structure, people don't understand this. The degree structure of the Scottish Rite is out of order, people. When you go to degrees 15 through 32, you're now back in time. The 13th degree is the highest degree of the Scottish Rite, and it's the 7th in the York Rite. That's the end of the Masonic story. Those are the two most critical, important degrees in the highest degree body. The 33rd degree in the Scottish, now numerically they're not the highest, I understand that, but symbolically they are the highest degree and the most important. This is why the number 13 is omnipresent on the Great Seal of the United States. The Scottish Rite Temple sits 13 blocks from the White House. It doesn't sit 32 blocks, it sits 13 blocks. This is the highest degree and the most important degree. And if you're interested, read the Royal Arch of Enoch book and you'll understand why.
Fascinating. I had no idea. We're going to go ahead and skip this break so we can just keep it going. But that brings a lot of insight. Now, becoming a Christ scares people. But if you really look at the work of Jesus that wasn't included in the official Constantine canon, you realize that that's what he was basically saying. I mean, you can even find remnants of it in the actual Gospels. He says, all of these things that I do, you can also do as well.
I was just about to say
you can
that.
even do better than I can do this. So the people who are scared to walk that path, they need to realize that this is what Jesus was saying, is that you have to become the Christ.
Right. What the degree system is all about is, and this is where it gets very adroit and very, very complex, is when you go through the Blue Lodge system, this is degrees 1, 2, and 3, and when you get to the third degree, you have this whole, where the candidate goes through this ritualistic symbolic death and is resurrected. What you want to call, like, what I would call in the book, like a Gnostic reawakening, where the Blue Lodge ritual is designed to, you're dead, you're brought back to life, and now your purpose in life, you can go out and affect positive change. The old you is gone, the new you is alive. You've undergone this, this Gnostic reawakening. You've died. You've been brought from the darkness to the light, to use the terminology. This is what's going on in the Blue Lodge. There is something that's happening in the Blue Lodge. The candidate, I don't want to give too much of this away. The candidate portrays this guy named Hiram Abiff, and he is the builder of Solomon's Temple. And this is critical to the Masonic legend and lore. Abiff possesses the secret name of God, the Tetragrammaton, and it's through the pronunciation of this word that all wisdom is made possible. And when he is murdered, the word is lost. And you will constantly hear this in the Blue Lodge, the lost word of a Master Mason. This is what the Blue Lodge Masons are running around looking for forever. The lost word of a Master Mason. We got to find the lost word. When the candidate is resurrected, he has a substitute word given to him. It's not the real word. When you go into the high degree bodies and you get to the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite and you get to the 7th in the York Rite, the word is found. They find it. And the candidate, by finding this word, becomes godlike because it's the name of God. And why this is so important is when the country was being developed, it was through this high degree body. You had to be exalted or perfected and have this word in order to do anything in the country. And this is where all this conspiracy comes from with the high degrees and things like that. See, and again, it ties into the history of the country. The Blue Lodges were all governed by the state Grand Lodges, but the high degrees allowed politicians and Masons to interact with one another across state lines. And the way they did it was through the high degree bodies. And one of the ways was possession of this secret name. And this is why this ritual is so critical to understanding the history of the United States. But to answer your question, and the point was, symbolically, when the candidate possessed this name, they became godlike. It's apotheosis is what it is. It's a form of Christian apotheosis. So in the Blue Lodge, you have this paradigm of Gnostic reawakening, and in the high degrees, you have apotheosis, godlike, attaining godlike status, and it's very distinct. There is a very distinct feel between the high degrees and the Blue Lodge. For instance, in the Blue Lodge, you have themes of egalitarianism, democracy, brotherhood. In the high degrees, you have themes of papal monarchy, divinity, becoming Christ-like. This is a total departure from the Blue Lodge. And when you understand where the high degrees are coming from, how they were developed, who cultivated them, it shouldn't come as a surprise. But it's a very fascinating, paradigm going on. But this is essentially, you're right. I mean, this is again, what Jesus was talking about, and it's what is one of the main features of the high degrees, this apotheosis element that's going on that is distinctly different from the Blue Lodge system.
Well, it's fascinating because you have things like the Da Vinci Code that claim, theories that paint the idea of a bloodline of Jesus, et cetera, and the Catholic Church wanting to suppress certain elements of Jesus, one of them being the sense of divinity, that you can be divine. When Constantine went through the canon with the Council of Nicaea, he purposefully excluded anything that the Essene or other similar groups had believed, and they wanted to create that barrier. You have to go to them in order to get to the divine. You don't go inside to get to the divine. You go out to them. So it doesn't surprise me at all that Masonry would be demonized, especially in the higher degrees. We always hear this too, the term, and I hate it because it's a derogatory term, but you hear the term porch mason, and I'm doing bunny ears as I do this. And they say, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with the porch masons. They're fine. But the higher degrees, they're the evil ones. They're the ones that are keeping all the secrets, et cetera, et cetera. And if the secret is that you are divine yourself, well, of course, that's going to be church propaganda to keep you going back to them.
Right. Well, in the high degrees, the secret was this name of God that was recovered, that you can't find in the Blue Lodge, and that was one of the real distinct features of it. And the high degrees really continue on the story that's going on inside the Blue Lodge. That's really, what their function is. They're very critical, when they're created. What the Royal Arch of Enoch book was about was when the degrees are being cultivated, the Royal Arch ceremonial is incorporating elements of the Book of Enoch, 1 Enoch, which shouldn't be happening because the book was lost to history. So how could that be? It's a historical anomaly. But the ritual is so critical because it really is the ritual that the United States is being crafted around. So yeah, it definitely has this apotheosis theme in it. Which can be, viewed negatively, no question about it. It can be viewed positively as well, but it can also be viewed negatively. But yeah, I mean, whenever you're dealing with, the Catholic Church, there's, been papal bulls against, Freemasonry from the Catholic Church. They invent their own Freemasonry in the late 19th century. Called the Knights of Columbus. They could basically just get tired of fighting and say, well, we'll just come up with our own Freemasonry, and they call it the Knights of Columbus. So yeah, the high degrees, they come out of Paris, France, and it's the Society of Jesus behind them. It's part of the Counter-Reformation. And they have a decidedly different feel than the Blue Lodge degrees. But again, you have to understand the backdrop of the Counter-Reformation, of what was going on in the world, and understand, why they were created and what their motivations were created. And again, it ties into, it's a very deep story. Again, read the book if you're interested. France, is where they're born out of. The Scottish Rite is not Scottish. I mean, a lot of people are not aware of that. It's born in Paris, France. It ties into Scotland because one of the earlier workings of the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial, in the ritual as it is today, the subterranean treasure vault is discovered by Jewish temple builders. In one of the earlier workings called the Scotch Master's Degree, it's discovered by Scottish Knights Templar. So that's where it gets the Scottish Rite title from. But it's actually French in origin. So yeah, there is a definite distinct feel between the Blue Lodge and the high degrees. But read the book because it's really, I mean, we won't have time even in the remaining half hour to get into it. But there is a decidedly distinct feel. And it's very important that people understand, what's going on in the high degrees, what makes them distinct. And also what makes them somewhat similar to the Blue Lodge, this whole tie-in to the lost word of a Master Mason, that's really critical. But it's really an important ritual to understand, especially when you're dealing with the development of the United States and the symbolism associated with it.
Well, I can tell you this, everything that we've spoken about, everything that I've learned about Masonry has done nothing but complement the journey that I've been on for almost a decade now. I think that goes to say for a lot of the listeners out there as well. Everybody is interested in the esoteric. People are hungry for it. They're hungry for this gnosis. They're hungry for something different than what they've been force-fed by the churches over and over and over again. And people are all coming to these realizations on their own. It's beautiful. It's really amazing to see this revival that's taking place.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with you. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, you didn't interrupt. Actually, I was thinking that we were going to you. So.
Oh, no. I totally agree. I think one of the things that's unique with the Blue Lodge ritual, the third degree ritual, is you will clearly see a Christian parallel with the whole idea of the dead and resurrected God man. In Masonry, it's invested with the solar aspects to it. There's a lot of solar symbolism, a lot of Egyptian solar symbolism going on with that. I mean, when you come to understand it and then you start to draw comparisons with Christianity, I mean, you will clearly see, again, the solar, comparative study there with Jesus being the sun, the 12 apostles being the 12 houses of the zodiac. A lot of the Christian religious festivals are based on the sun. Christmas is the winter solstice. I mentioned this earlier. The 12 apostles are the 12 houses of the zodiac. In the Royal Arch of Enoch, in chapter 3 of the Royal Arch, I have the whole breakdown on all this, on which one of the apostles are, the corresponding zodiac. So you will find, deep, comparisons with Christianity, with sun worship, with, groups, with solar cults coming out of the Roman Empire, whether it be Mithraism or Sol Invictus, with Judaism, with even things with their religious ceremony, religious festivals. The Passover again has a lot of solar allegory with it. Again, Hanukkah. I mean, here we are at the winter solstice. This is. This is one of the things that I got out of Masonry and the rituals was to go on this quest, this esoteric quest, to look into this comparative religion study and how much of it relates to astrology and astronomy and the mystery schools. It's a very deep study, and again, if you talk about esoteric symbolism. And again, this is what was one of my motivating factors for writing the Royal Arch, was to flesh all this out. So again, please, by all means, read the Royal Arch of Enoch book if you're interested in this. I go into it in much more depth than I'm talking about it right now. But I agree with you both. It's a very fascinating study, and I totally agree with what you were saying about it being revived and people are hungry for it. I couldn't agree more with you. And I think, to be honest with you, to be brutally honest, and I'll end on this point. I think, I know I've been on with you guys before and we talked about synchronicity and things like that. I don't think the Royal Arch of Enoch book would have been possible 20 years ago, or even been paid attention to. I think, that the timing of it was almost very syncretic. And I think the interest in the book, because of the time frame we're living in and this revival of what you're talking about, and I do not disagree with you in any way. I think that's really, helped the Royal Arch of Enoch and help people understand it. I'm all but certain of it, in fact.
Well, it's nice to see Masonry coming out in the open. I was at a restaurant the other day, and the Grand Lodge here in the state of Washington actually started running ads for Masonry, which is the first time I've ever seen it that open. But I think it just goes to show that it's come to a point now to where it's something that that resonates with a lot of people. Are you at liberty, because we have a question here about the square and compass, and I don't know if you're at liberty to speak about the symbolism of the square and compass, what that means for morality, maybe the symbolism of the square as well, how it changes a person's, or how a person can use those working tools in their day-to-day life, perhaps. And then there was also another question about the square and compass in relation to geometry and the Rodin numbers as well. So I don't know which one you want to tackle, but take us away.
Right. Well, Masonry in the Blue Lodges uses working tools, craftsman tools to teach morality, squaring your actions. I'm sure a lot of the listeners have heard the term on the level. Is he on the level? This comes out of Blue Lodge Freemasonry. The level is a working tool. the whole idea is when you build something, you're using these tools to create perfection. So, in using them as teaching tools to teach morality, you're teaching perfection. Is the parallel you're looking for? The square and compasses, it's the same, theme there. It's tying into geometry, sacred geometry, the idea that God is a mathematician and that he created the universe using perfected esoteric techniques. We talked about earlier in the show, the title of the God figure in the Masonic Lodge is the Great Architect, or the Great Architect of the universe. And of course, the term architect invokes, a civil engineer or a celestial or a divine engineer of some type. So, we're in Masonry. We're dealing with the idea of using craftsman tools to teach perfection, to teach morality, squaring your actions, working on the level, we've all heard that term before, is the person on the level.
Get it squared away.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. That's all coming out of Blue Lodge Freemasonry. People are using the terms and not even being aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true. So that's, without giving too much away, that's what the symbolism of a lot of this, the square and compasses are in Masonry, and a lot of the other symbolism that, we're scratching the surface here. When it comes to Masonic symbolism, this is a lot of this is explained. I'm not putting it down or anything like that. This is, explained in like the entered apprentice degree, the fellowcraft degree, certainly very important within Freemasonry. But it's really when you hit that third degree, that's where a lot of the esoteric, what I would call more the esoteric symbolism can be found, is coming out of that third degree ritual. And that's when you start that's when you start getting into the mystery school aspect of it.
Sounds fascinating. It really does. So in relation to the rodent numbers, I'm not familiar with the term rodent numbers. I don't know if you are, but the listener asked, why does, you're not familiar?
Well, what was it?
Why does the Freemason symbol square and compass have the same geometry as the rodent numbers, RODIN?
I think he's talking about the rodent coil.
Maybe. Right. Okay. I'm not familiar with that term.
I'm not familiar with it either, and it's something I'd have to look up. So I'm just going to have to, pass on the question. Sorry.
Okay.
I have another question that somebody keeps asking. Rainbow said, "Are you going to give a little detail on the Royal Arch of Enoch and the Capstone Cancer constellation, the stone the builders rejected?"
Oh, right. Yeah,
that's question.
That's very critical to all this. The keystone or the cornerstone absolutely is the sign of Cancer. This is that's another Royal Arch symbol, is the arch that the sun travels on between the vernal equinox and the autumn equinox. And of course, the capstone or keystone is Cancer. That's the halfway point. Absolutely true. Masonry is founded under the House of Cancer on June 24th. That is a solar allegory. Of course, it's under the sign of Cancer that we have the summer solstice, when the sun, being the most important symbol within all of Freemasonry, is exalted in the northern hemisphere. Absolutely correct. You will see that archway with the keystone or the cornerstone with the astrological sigil of Cancer on it. Very good pickup by you. That's absolutely true. I get into it much more in the book, but yeah, there is a lot of astrological symbolism going on in Freemasonry. And of course, Masonry was founded on June 24th, which is of course occurs under the House of Cancer. And again, this is a solar reference, with the Cancer being the most in the northern hemisphere, the sign that the sun is at its strongest point at. There are two stars in the constellation of Cancer. It has no bright stars in it. This ties into the Bible story with Jesus being the sun. Of course, each house of the zodiac is approximately 30 days. However, Cancer has no bright stars in it, and because of this, you will constantly hear Cancer being referred to as a sign of the zodiac with 40 days. So you will constantly hear 40 days in the desert in the Bible with Jesus being the sun. being 40 days in the desert. And of course, he's in the desert because it's the sun at its strongest. And again, this is an astrological allegory. So when you hear that Bible story of Jesus being in the desert for 40 days, that is because the sun is at its strongest and it's a desert. It's hot. And of course, he's tempted by who else? The goat, the devil. And of course, the opposite house of Cancer is Capricorn, the goat. This is why Jesus, the sun god, is tempted in Cancer by the devil. I mean, this is completely astrological. This is not, real. This is just symbolic. Two of the lesser stars in Capricorn are the two donkeys. And again, this is why Jesus, this is another astrological story in the Bible that gets flipped. This is why Jesus, when he's triumphant, again, the sun god, riding into Jerusalem triumphant. And this is again, the sun being the most powerful in the sign of Cancer. This is why he rides two donkeys, because the sun is strongest in the sign of Cancer. So Jesus rides triumphantly on two donkeys. And it's a reference to these two stars in the constellation Cancer, the great donkey and the little donkey. I forget the name of them, but that's also an astrological allegory. So yeah, when you're dealing with Freemasonry in the Bible, you'll constantly find these comparative astrological allegories going on. It's a fascinating study. It's very esoteric, very occult. If you're interested, by all means, check out the Royal Arch of Enoch book. I go into it in much more in depth in the book, but great esoteric wisdom.
Would you agree with the notion, because I've heard this more than once, I was actually watching an interview with a 32nd degree Freemason, and it was a church guy, and the church guy was trying to tell him that Masonry was evil, et cetera, et cetera. But I was listening to what the 32nd degree Mason was saying, and he was saying that the higher degrees aren't necessarily higher in the sense that they're a progression, but rather they're more off to the side, kind of complementing the Blue Lodge as opposed to a higher and lower progression. Your thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, I think you could say that. That would be I don't think that's a necessarily bad interpretation. What I would say is they sort of, the best way for me to describe it is they continue the story of the Blue Lodge. That's really, when you go through the Blue Lodge and you hit that third degree, it's a continuation of this biblical mystical story that's going on. But you could say, there's side degrees or auxiliary degrees. That's, instead of higher degrees, that's a word that I've heard as well. I won't split hairs. I have really no problem with that assessment of it. That's fine. Most people use the term high degrees. That seems to be the term that's in the vogue the most. But if you want to call them auxiliary degrees or side degrees, I won't argue with you.
Okay. The reason I say that is just to clarify for people out there, because a 32nd degree isn't necessarily, at least to my understanding, higher in the ranks than a Master Mason third degree, maybe the Worshipful Master of the Lodge, et cetera, et cetera. It's all kind of on an even level playing field.
Right. You'll hear the term thrown around from time to time. There's no degree higher than the third degree. And what they're really saying by that is, and I can't really disagree with it, is you can't, the third degree is the Master Mason. That's, when you're the Freemason. And that's your title. You're a Freemason at that point. No one holds themselves out. I don't, when I'm a Freemason, myself personally, I don't hold myself out as, I'm a 32nd degree master of the royal secret. I'm a Freemason, and that's really what it's trying to connotate. But I would definitely say that the high degrees are definitely instructive, and for me, I think they're worth pursuing. They're worth looking into. But again, it's completely up to the Master Mason, the Blue Lodge Mason to do it. No one will coerce you. It's just up to you if you want to do it. But I think for me personally, they're worthy and worth doing because of the information they contain, and especially the symbolism they contain and how it relates to the founding of the country. So on that aspect, I understand what they're saying about, there's no degree higher than the third degree. I've heard that myself a million times. I won't argue it, but I would say there is wisdom in the high degrees and it's worth looking at.
If we can switch the topic for a bit, and I don't know if you need to take off at the top of the hour or if you can stay with us a little bit longer, completely up to you. But I do want to get into cinema symbolism a little bit. And the first question that I would ask about that is, why do you think the Masonic symbolism is so embedded within a lot of these cult classics would you say that it's actually speaking to people on a subconscious level?
Well, I would say a couple things. I would say that number one is that there is Masonic symbolism in movies, but I would also say it's not necessarily all Masonic. We're dealing with alchemy, we're dealing with Kabbalah, we're dealing with numbers. It's not. I want to make that clear that it's not all Freemasonic symbolism. There are some that have it, like the National Treasure movie, which is the Royal Arch of Enoch ritual. Da Vinci Code has some of it as well. But when I do the movie books and when I write the two movie books, it is so critical to present the movie in its proper esoteric context. Once the context is discovered, then the movie becomes much more easier to dissect. I talk about in the books, why is the symbolism being used? I say it's akin to using sacred geometry in a building. It heightens the movie. It elevates the movie. It elevates it to mythology. It definitely can reinforce different themes going on in the celluloid that can definitely tweak your subconscious mind that you may not be aware of. And it definitely also can play on your conscious mind. You may see it but not recognize it. A lot of movie makers, I'm 100% convinced, do this as it can be a challenge for them. They want to test you almost to see if you can discover what the movie is underlying, what the underlying themes are. I think of directors like Darren Aronofsky and Stanley Kubrick come to mind, especially when it comes to playing a game of chess with these guys. So the incorporation of this, it can be done for mythology making. I mean, I guess you could craft an argument that it could be done for mind control. I don't really see it that way. I think a lot of this is very sublime. It's very unique. It's very interesting. It's very deep. And it goes just beyond, looking for eyes and triangles in the background, things like that. But yeah, you can be dealing with Masonic symbolism, but you can also be dealing with mystery schools, comparative religion, alchemy, Kabbalah. It's a very deep study and it's very contextual. And if you're interested in it, believe me, I have two books out on it as well. I could stay with you for a little bit longer, after the hour.
Okay. I know you're on the East Coast, so I don't want to keep you too long. What film sticks out the most when it comes to either Masonic or Gnostic symbolism out of all that you've covered?
Oh, my goodness gracious. For Masonic symbolism, I would say the National Treasure movie. If you want to watch a Masonic ritual on screen, that's it. The Royal Arch of Enoch ritual is the National Treasure movie. So, for instance, in the ritual, it's the recovery or restoration of the Masonic Templar treasure in a subterranean treasure vault beneath the Holy Ground. So we turn to the National Treasure movie and we have a Masonic ritual on screen. It's the recovery or restoration of the Templar Masonic treasure in a subterranean treasure vault beneath the Holy Ground. They said it in New York City. That's a clear reference to DeWitt Clinton and the Royal Arch Masons. So if you want to see a Masonic ritual on the big screen, look no further than the Royal Arch of Enoch. If you want to see a Masonic ritual on screen, look no further than National Treasure. Good gracious. Gnostic films, the first Matrix movie would come to mind. As I guess that would be the king daddy, the granddaddy of all the Gnostic films. Other Gnostic films, I would turn to The Truman Show. Fight Club has Gnostic themes. It's a movie I haven't seen in a while, but I would have to go back and rewatch it. But certainly,
well, the one thing you mentioned that stuck out about Fight Club was the fact that the main character's name was Tyler. And you pointed out the Masonic symbolism that the Tyler is the one that guards the door. Mm-hmm. You knock 3 times. In that particular movie, it was you wait 3 days on the porch until you're invited in. So yeah, that stuck out.
Right, that the Fight Club has Gnostic themes in it, but it also has the mystery school Masonic aspect as well. You're absolutely correct. The guardian of the secrets of Fight Club is Tyler Durden. The Tyler in Freemasonry is the guy who guards the secrets. You're absolutely correct. Standing outside 3 days reflects the 3 degrees of Masonry. Here, then you're brought inside and you're initiated into the mysteries of Fight Club, which is essentially deconstruction of the self to find enlightenment, to find spiritualism. I call it in the book the spiritual exercises of Tyler Durden. Absolutely correct. You'll find this also echoed in the Matrix movie, The Secret Society Masonic, where Neo, Keanu Reeves, goes into the Masonic, the hotel quasi Masonic lodge where all the crew of the Nebuchadnezzar are. Of course, they're in the phony world. Neo goes in. You have the black and white checkerboard floor. This is the threshing floor of Ornan the Jesuit of the Bible. This is, of course, the floor of Solomon's temple. So he goes in. You have the Masonic, and then he goes up the staircase, symbolizing the ladder of ascension, the ladder of Mithras, the winding staircase of Solomon's temple to meet Hermes Trismegistus or Morpheus, who's going to initiate him into the secrets, and tell him what's really going on. So yeah, we can find this Hermetic Freemasonic influence in the Matrix as well.
I need to go back and watch that. It'd be interesting to see if he goes up 3, 5, and 7 steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely goes up the ladder of ascension. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it myself. Then you have the whole idea of, getting the 2 pills, the blue lodge, the blue pill. He can stay stagnant or go to the high degrees, the red pill.
Ah, interesting.
Goes through the mirror, Alice in Wonderland, the looking glass to the, real world, Christ-like up into the Nebuchadnezzar. If you want to take a break, I could stick around for another 10, 15 minutes if you like.
Awesome. Yes. Let's end it for our iHeartRadio listeners and everybody on TFR. Stay tuned. We have Paranormal Portal coming up next. But everybody watching on YouTube and Facebook, we have another few minutes for you right on the other side.
The light of the body is the eye. Therefore, when thine eye is single, thy whole body is full of light. But when thine eye is evil, thy body is full of darkness. Take heed, therefore, that the light which is in thee be not darkness, as you step beyond the veil.
Oh, I got to pull this song. We got copyright strikes on it last time.
Right.
So, yeah. Anyways, we're back. We're going to do a little bit longer with Robert W. Sullivan IV. And we were talking about the Matrix film and the symbolism there. Now, when he makes his ascent, and this is something that stuck out, the wording especially, he meets the quote-unquote architect of the Matrix. And Robert, we talk about artificial intelligence here and the idea of a demiurge, but we do it in a more technological context, which is artificial intelligence, computer simulation, et cetera, very similar to the Matrix. But Neo encounters the architect, which is an artificial intelligence machine that is controlling the Matrix. Why do you think they picked that particular term, the architect?
Yeah, it's interesting. They in part 2 he meets the architect, which again, definitely conjures, the Freemason great architect of the universe, the demiurge. Sometimes gets associated with this, the creator of the false reality. I mean, again, this ties into the Gnostic themes going on inside the Matrix film. Where clearly the architect is clearly your demiurge figure, the creator of the false simulation. You have the archons, would be the agents led by Smith. I mean, this is all, if you study Gnosticism, this is all coming out of the world of a Gnostic philosopher known as Valentinus, where you had the demiurge, the creator of the false reality, the archons, they running it imperfectly. You have the Christ awakener figure, which would be Neo, who's the liberator of mankind. I mean, clearly you have Christ elements. In Valentinian's cosmology, the Jesus Christ was the illuminator figure, not necessarily a divine, Son of God. You can look at him as a divine figure, but he was sent to enlighten mankind, to ignite their divine spark. And you find this clearly with Neo in the Matrix films, and clearly you have Christ allegory. I mean, all over in Neo. I mean, when he answers the door, the one guy says to him, "You're my own personal Jesus Christ." When he gets hoisted up into the Nebuchadnezzar to the light, he's lifted up cruciform. Pay attention when he comes on board the deck, the bridge of the Nebuchadnezzar ship. You'll see the plate, and I believe it's Mark 3:11, which is the Bible verse. which says, "Thou art the Son of Man, and all dark demons bow down before you." Another Christ allegory. And then, of course, Neo, all good solar saviors, is killed and resurrected. And then at the very end of the Matrix, he lifts off into the air, into the heavens, ascends, like Jesus does at the end of the New Testament. Think Truman Burbank in the Truman Show. He does the same thing. So yeah, I don't, when you're talking the Matrix film, 1, 2, and 3, especially part 1. I would say, that really is, kind of the granddaddy of all the Gnostic films out there. That's got everything you want in it from a Gnostic standpoint. No doubt about it.
Interesting. So I hope I'm not saying too much or presuming too much here with this, but it seems to me like Masonry is about what you bring into it is what you're going to take out of it. And there are several different paths, and it's all up to the individual. If you want to remain as a quote unquote child of God and a servant of God, et cetera, there's a path for you there. If you want to take divinity for yourself and reclaim your divinity, there's that path as well. And you get through certain levels where it's basically all inside of you at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. You could go through it and get nothing out of it. You could go through it and get something tremendous out of it. It really is, it really is an individual journey that the person is on. I can only speak to what I got out of it, but what I got out of it may not be what someone else got out of it. For example, when I did it, for me, it was going through the rituals, understanding it, understanding the symbolism of it. This is what I got out of it. Many Masons go and they want to join the lodge officers. That really didn't, wasn't that important to me. I was much more interested in studying the symbolism and the hidden meanings than I was, serving as senior warden. But that was just me, that was just my thing on it. Other people will see it differently. What I got out of it was, to really, understand the symbolism, research it. And then, for me personally, it was these greater truths, were opened up to you. And again, this was, what motivated partially to me to write the Royal Arch of Enoch. And quite honestly, Chris, and Cherie, I said this earlier in the show, and I'll just say it again, before we wrap up. My books would not exist but for my membership in Freemasonry. So, yeah, you can get, every person is probably going to get, something different out of it, if even anything at all. There are people I know who go through it and think, okay, that's great, and then they go about their lives and don't think anything really more than it than that. I've met people who have started it and stopped, and they didn't think it was for them. So, it really can be individualistic. It's, up to you. And, I think ultimately what the Blue Lodge ritual is trying to teach is, what I talked about, it's divine spark ignition. But whether it ignites is, I guess, an individual thing.
Divine spark ignition. Yeah. I love that term.
Yeah, that's what I see out of it. And, whether it ignites or not is, I guess, up to the individual Mason.
It's all you. That's what it's all about. Question from Colin. Are there any symbols in Masonry that have affected you the most or that have been the most meaningful?
My answer to that would be any symbols specifically, no, but I would say studying the symbols have been very important to me. That's a very deep study. And again, that's one of the motivations for writing the book. So any specific symbol, I would say no. But I would say the study of the symbols themselves are very important and very critical. And for me, were critical to writing my books, all of them. No question about it.
The multidimensional layer, I forget the term that I'm looking for. Just the fact that the symbols are multidimensional. I imagine nature, that's what I'm looking at. I don't know why I couldn't remember. The multidimensional nature of symbols, I imagine, would make it very, very difficult to actually study the symbols.
Yes and no. I would say, it's spending a lot of time reading and writing and researching. If you turn to the works, I mean, it can be done. I did it. I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. If you wanted to start studying this, I mean, I would say, and I guess a shameless promotion, read the Royal Arch of Enoch book. If the other two books that just come to mind would be Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachers of All Ages and Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, would be other books if you're interested in symbolism of Freemasonry and symbolism in general. I would say, you could, read my book, of course. I would say if you want to read the Albert Pike book, I would say read the Manly P. Hall book first. Hall does a much better job of introducing the stuff than Pike does. Pike's books is a little more complex. I would say Pike's book's not for beginners. Hall's is. So if you're interested in symbolism, shameless promotion, read Royal Arch of Enoch, but start with the Manly P. Hall book, Secret Teachers of All Ages. That's a very good starter book. I mean, that's very, very good. That's a very good book to start with.
Excellent. We're going to let you go here in a few minutes because I know it's late where you are. I do want to ask you this, though. For the last 3 broadcasts or 4 broadcasts, we've asked you all the questions. We've come up with all the topics. We've had the listeners come up with topics, etc. Is there anything that we've missed that's important to you? And we should have asked this 3 broadcasts ago.
Yeah, we really should have.
No, we could do a show. I mean, I would say we've probably very much skimmed the cinema stuff. So we could always come back and do. I mean, some of the symbolism in cinema is really mind blowing. As to what the lengths these guys will go to hide stuff in movies. And I think in the past times we've been on with you guys. I've been on with you guys. I think we've really concentrated on the Masonry, which is fine. I have no problem doing that. But we could certainly come back and do a show on some of the movies. I mean, some of the movies are just really overloaded. I think of stuff like The Wizard of Oz or Crimson Peak or The Shining. Just some really fascinating stuff going on inside those. So no, I mean, you did a great show. I mean, we talked about the Pact with the Devil book. We talked Freemasonry. We got into some of the movie stuff. It's all important to me. In fact, I'll give a little shameless promotion here. Let me pull this up. This just came the other day. I mean, I actually have the print edition of A Pact with the Devil.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
Just got that. This is brand new. And of course, this, because I don't have the Cinema Symbolism 2 also, my copies of Royal Arch of Enoch and the first Cinema Symbolism are in another room, so I can't hold them up right now. But shameless promotion there on my behalf. No, it was a great show. We did good. And of course, I thank you for having me on. And anytime you want to have me back, it's always interesting. You always come up with great questions for me. So we can do it all again. We can concentrate on Masonry. We can concentrate on more movies. Me.
Excellent. Give us your websites real quick and anything else you'd like to direct the list. Anywhere else you'd like to direct the listeners to.
Right. Well, again, thank you guys for having me on Beyond the Veil. The show is tremendous. It's always a pleasure to be here and talk to you guys. It's a wonderful show, and thank you for having me on. If you're interested in me or my books, the easiest way is just go to my website. My website is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is www.robertwsullivan, the letter I, the letter V, IV.com for the fourth, Robert W. Sullivan, IV.com. Links there to buy all my books. They're all available they're available through all major online retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. They're in the print edition and the ebook forms. A Pact with the Devil ebook is on its way. That is not out yet, but that is on its way. You can get the Royal Arch Cinema books. They're all ebooks, print edition. On my website, there's links to follow me on social media, Twitter. I have a YouTube channel with videos and a playlist with countless interviews I've done. Links to my Twitter page. The website is constantly updated with information about appearances I'm going to be at, my biography, links to buy the books. All that stuff's there. News and updates. Like again, website. What's on one of the radio shows I'm going to be on. Earlier this month, I was interviewed by Fraternal Review magazine in Southern California, and I have a whole Q&A in that magazine about Star Wars and Freemasonry and mythology. So there's links there, in my media section about that. The website is constantly updated. It's very easy to navigate. Again, www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. Links to buy the book, links about me, information about me, links to social media, information about upcoming radio shows I'm going to do, and events I'm doing, and things going on. Just go there. Very easy to use. www.robertwsullivan.iv.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, all the research, everything that you've shared with us. And let's try to plan a show for January, February to do the cinema symbolism. Mm-hmm. In my particular path right now, it's still early. And I'm just starting to really unravel all of the conspiracy stuff and really see Masonry for what it is. So I think that's why I'm so stuck on the Royal Arch right now. Next show, let's do nothing but cinema symbolism.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
And, we can always talk Masonry. That's one of my favorite talking points. If we're going to end, just hold the line, Chris. I just got a quick question, but I want to ask you off the air.
Okay.
Before we go.
Okay, no problem. Give me just a second. Let me pull up the ending music here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in this evening, and special thanks to Robert W. Sullivan IV, who spent so much time with us this evening and has always been gracious with his time, and has really opened up new doors and new levels of understanding for me. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Kiss the one you love right now. You never know when the last time is going to be. And we will end it.
And we will see you guys tomorrow night. So, love you.
With this. Love you.